The eastern part of the region was surprisingly calm. It seemed that all nature and the world around it were in complete harmony. Suddenly, this harmony was interrupted by the screams of a man. He was screaming. Did he really move and was coughing loudly? When this man looked at his hand, it seemed like he was just in shock because he didn't recognize his hands. He continued to scream how this could happen. Because he had just been dozing in math class, and in one moment, he had become an old man. He was indignant because he considered himself an ordinary guy, 185 centimeters tall. He had never met a girl, and then suddenly he turned into some old man. I think about everything that happened to him. He counted once he got to another world and became an old man. He tried to look into his memories. He realized that he had entered the Kunlun world where cultivators rule. They have a gradation of levels consisting of several levels. Originally, the owner of Ye Junling's body possessed exceptional talent and reached the Golden Core stage, which led to him being appointed as the head of Xuantianzong Peak. However, during the cleansing of the legal cultivators, he was caught off guard, and his Dantian was destroyed. And at that moment, all his strength disappeared, turning him into an ordinary person. He spent the next few decades in complete apathy, locked away on the mountain and not interested in the outside world. 110 years passed. The old man tried to look with his own eyes at what was happening, and he understood the truth that lay on the surface. He was terrified that, judging by the signs, he was just an ordinary mortal. Judging by his age, his end could come at any moment, and he had only just arrived in this world. He decided that he shouldn't be upset because from his experience of reading web novels, if this move should definitely give some more perks, then he thought that he still had a chance. He gathered his strength and hit the ground with his staff, which was in his hand, with all his might. Thus, he tried to express his protest. That's why he shouted for the system that moved him to this place to quickly show itself. For some time, he stood and cursed at the system that had moved him to this place. He waited for an answer. Having received no answer, he began to shout that this system had decided to play hide-and-seek with him. Most likely, it should have given him at least a chance and not disappeared. When he realized that no one was answering him and nothing was happening to him, then he began to pitifully scream at the system that he was wrong. He wanted someone to respond. When the moment of despair passed, another thought appeared in his head. It was like an epiphany. Then he thought maybe it wasn't about the system at all, as he thought. But suddenly, it was all about the ring with the spirit of the elder. He even thought that he might have to pretend to be weak for a while. This ring, he began to yawn. Then he turned to the old doctor. He wanted to clarify, "He is here." But in response, he again received nothing. For some time, he stood and looked at this ring in anticipation. He even started talking to the old doctor so that he wouldn't hide because he knew that he was there. But not having received any answer, he thought that it was an absolutely useless thing and it could not help him in any way, so he threw it over his shoulder. He was just in despair. Raising his staff up, he started shouting that this couldn't be, this was all wrong. It was at this moment, when he started screaming, that he saw a table appear where it was written that the system was activated automatically. She asked the owner to be more decent. Having read this, he was happy, which meant that it was a system after all, and it finally appeared. The system answered him that it was handing him a starter kit. He was so angry that he couldn't contain his emotions, so he shouted at the system to open the starter pack as soon as possible. The system congratulated him on gaining the ability called Meeting the Power I Become Stronger. He only had to meet an opponent whose level is higher than his, and he would immediately receive cultivation one step higher. When he read everything that the system offered him, he then realized that in this situation he was an ordinary person, and he did not have any additional power. He thought it was a great chance, and if he encountered an immortal, he could also become one. The system gave him a notification that it was not deceiving its owner. He thought, if he could become invincible and be one step ahead of everyone to cultivate at that moment, the system gave another notification that there was only an hour left before his natural death. Then he got upset again. He wasn't ready for the fact that he was already going to die. He decided that he needed to go down the mountain and find someone to fight with in order to gain strength and prolong his life. He hurried down the steps from the mountain, thinking why this old man was sitting on the mountain all this time. The system notified that there were 35 minutes left until his death. He was in shock. Raising his head up, he saw that somewhere from behind the opposite mountain a flock of monsters was approaching, but it was quite far from him. The people who were below were also outraged at how this pack of monsters dared to approach them. What kind of evil spirits were these that dared to challenge Xuantianzong? In turn, this evil spirit shouted to them that all people are creatures from Xuantianzong, And most likely, they did not expect that Dima, the monstrous king, was still alive, and this time he would exterminate them all. The head of the clan answered the monster that he was a vile creature and that he had once carried out a massacre in the state of Li. He had seriously wounded him and thrown him off a cliff. Despite this, he had survived and still dared to appear with revenge. In response, this monster laughed and said that this would be enough for her, so that he could take revenge for the past. The leader asked the monster if this creature had really overcome the barrier and reached the stage of the soul embryo. 4. The other warriors asked the leader what they would do because they could not compete with such a strong opponent. Then the head answered them that they would not be published without a fight either. They would need to enter into battle with these creatures no matter what. He said if that's the case, then they will fight to the end to protect Xuantianzong, and was the first to attack, showing an example to everyone else. On the other hand, the monster was also in the mood for victory, and he was ready to start a massacre of all these stinking people who were in front of him. At the top of the mountain stood the same old man who was trying to shout to them. He was shouting for someone to hit him. He was asking them to do it as quickly as possible. The system reminded him that there were 30 minutes left before his death. Then he thought that this was not very good and that time was running out for him. All these people were too far away. He thought if he continued to descend further, he would definitely not make it in time, so he had only one option left. The monster was sure that it would win, and it screamed that they were weaklings, and if this was all they could do, then this time their life would end. He was sure because he was the Demon King, and he was ready to show them the full power of the embryonic soul. He immediately sent a force towards them that was supposed to stop them. The power of this monster was so great that it immediately struck and threw back all the people who were below. The head, when he fell to the ground, thought that nothing could be done, because between the stage of the golden core to which and the embryonic soul to which the monster belonged, the gap was simply huge. This monster was delighted that no one else would dare to resist him, so he shouted at them to say goodbye to their lives. At that moment, the monster heard sounds coming from the other side. It was an old man who was shouting at the bird to look in his direction and not look around. He was addressing her. The monster was simply offended by such an attitude towards itself. It shouted to the old man, "Is he really tired of living?" The old man continued to shout into the megaphone of this huge bird, "If she doesn't like it, then let her hit him." He stands and waits for her, while thinking that it was good that he had time to learn about the loudspeaker from the old man's memories. The eyes of this monster bird became fiery in color. She shouted that she was seeing such an insolent old man for the first time and threw herself to attack him. Everyone else wondered if this was elder brother Ye. It was just incredible. It was reminiscent of that very legend from the soaring peak. They understood that this old man had not interfered in anything for decades. Perhaps he wanted to make his contribution. It was just a pity that he was caught off guard and his power disappeared, turning into... This monster turned to the old man and shouted, "Can he really tease the king of demonic animals? Most likely he is looking for his death," after which he laughed. The old man stood on the mountain shouting into a megaphone that he could hear everything and that he could roast him like a quail without cultivation. The system politely reminded him that there were 10 seconds left before his death. At that moment, he realized what a slow monster this was, and most importantly, talkative. If he didn't hit him at that moment, he would die without a fight. The last report began 10:09. These were his last seconds. He thought that he would be hit as quickly as possible. At that moment, the monster said if he wanted so, then he could wipe him into dust by starting the attack. The old man thought that this was great, and finally he was saved. The system sent him a notification that an enemy attack was detected at the initial stage of the embryonic soul. The ability that was given to him is triggered. This is when he meets the force. He becomes stronger. Now it became clear to him that he would not die, and he had acquired a sufficiently large amount of power that he simply needed. In one moment, he turned from a feeble old man into a young man who has quite a lot of strength and is at the 4th level. Seeing the old man's hand not shaking, but he had a completely different picture, he thought that finally the embryonic soul system answered him. This is the system in which he is. It is professional. After which a huge explosion sounded around this place. It was unclear what was happening for some time, but everything around was burning. The monster, who just a few seconds ago considered itself the strongest among all those present, did not understand what was happening. The people below also covered themselves from this powerful blow, because it was a terrible aura that was unbearable to hold back. They did not understand whether younger brother Ye was still alive. Now everyone could feel that this was the marriage of the embryonic soul. 4. It was the pinnacle of fighting power in the human world, and it was extremely terrifying. E was no longer that helpless old man. He had enormous power that he had just received, and he held this power in his hands. At that moment, the monster tried to clarify with him whether he was also at stage 4 and whether he had an embryonic soul and his strength was even stronger than his. People didn't realize that Ye was a user of the power of the embryonic soul, which meant that all these years he pretended to be broken, he only became a mere mortal on the outside. People stood with their eyes raised up, looked at him, and wondered if this was really the younger brother E. After all, he was at the stage of the embryonic soul, and in the whole wild region there were only a few of them, and their sect had found such a master. The monster said that everything that happened was just a misunderstanding. In response, he heard that it was he who destroyed the foundation of his sect and killed many students. The system congratulated the owner on his first acquired power. The system grants him the divine technique of the great wasteland finger squawking the heavens. After all, the words sounded like a challenge from the young man. Raising his 2 fingers up, he felt that he possessed the Shaolin Z technique. The frightened monster answered the young man that his strength was slightly superior to his, but the difference was not too great. Then it added, "Does he really want to fight to the death?" E stretched out his hand and answered the monster that if he was not touched, he would not touch anyone. If someone offended him, he would destroy him, especially in order to rise to the stage of the embryonic soul. He probably killed a lot of monsters. At that moment, the monster flapped its huge wings and shouted that people themselves forced it, and it will burn its inner pearl but will definitely kill it. E concentrated his newly acquired power in his hand and held it above his head. He was ready to strike his opponent because he did not know his limits. After which he lowered his hand, and the great void finger that bound the heavens was activated. The monster understood that he would not be able to do anything, and there was no way he could stop this attack. This fireball is getting closer and closer, and the monster understood that this was the end. It began to scream to E that he was ready to give up his tribe. He had reached the stage of the embryonic soul and did not want to die. But it seemed that E did not hear him at all and did not react to any of his words. He continued, and so the monster with his newly acquired power. It was a very strong blow, and with the help of this blow in one moment, he was able to destroy his opponent. This monster could not resist such a blow. It was clear that the monster was lying on the ground, and it was not a long fight at all, and it really was about who would remain alive. The rest who flew with this monster began to shout that their master had died, and they needed to escape from this place as quickly as possible. E extended his hand forward, he said to them. Were they not going to flee from the battlefield because he could not leave it like this? After which he attacked all the remaining bird monsters that were trying to escape from the battlefield. Ye told them that those stinking birds would no longer be able to disturb his Zhuantianzong sect. The people from his sect turned to Ye's younger brother and said that they were entirely indebted to him this time. He lowered his head. His head said that E had changed him before. He thought that his abilities were destroyed and he was broken. No one expected that he would break through to the stages of the embryonic soul. The girl's name was Su Qian Su. She was the head of Tianxian Peak. She noticed that this was all nonsense. She said to look at the younger brother Ye. Does he look like someone who has lost heart? She was supported by the head of the peak, Kanjian Xuantianzong, whose name was Zhao Dezhu. He said that what she said was correct. Younger brother Ye always kept a low profile, quietly protecting their sect. At that moment, the young man thought that they were great. Of course, they had good ideas, but it was not bad at all since he wouldn't have to explain anything. At this moment, a loud cry was heard from one of the sect members. He reported that a disaster had happened. The Xinlai sect suddenly seized their minds and spiritual veins among the disciples. Many were killed and wounded. The head of the sect was simply in shock. He couldn't believe it, although they already had strained relations with the Fangle sect, but he couldn't even imagine that they would dare to do something like that. They all understood perfectly well that without these spiritual veins, their paths of cultivation would be interrupted and they would be doomed. He turned to Ye and asked him if he could take the students to return their resources. Ye thought that the Fangle sect was one of the 6 major sects of the wild region. They had conflicts with it, but they attacked at this very moment, taking advantage of the monster invasion to strike. The system opened the quest to register, and Feng Qi thought that he had the ability, and it was time to attack their lair, telling everyone to act according to the plan, and he himself went to the Fangle sect. The head of the sect, when he heard such words, he was very surprised. He said that it was just a great plan, and also told the younger brother yes, that he was damn powerful. He ordered them to hold on, and he himself went to carry out the mission. The sect leader noted that many years had passed since Xuantianzong was so strong, but now with the head of Peak Yi, they would be able to become the first of the 6 sects of the wild region. In the Filei sect, after the recent events, there was a heated discussion about what would happen next. One of the representatives of this sect said that he did not expect that everything would go so smoothly. He added that by luring the monster to Xuantianzong, they waited for the right moment to get their hands on their spiritual veins. Another noted that in this way, they could soon become the main sect of the entire wild region. They answered him, didn't he hear that a powerful goose from the Yuhua sect had arrived in the Fangle sect, so they shouldn't have any problems? The head of the Fangle sect, whose name was Chun Yunhai, approached Elder Mu. He wanted to know if it was true that his son, Chun Xiao, had shown himself to be an excellent person in the Yuhua sect and had already been accepted by a certain lord as a personal disciple. Elder Mu answered the head of the sect. He told him that this was precisely why he came from Qingzhou, why he said that his son was noticed by Gui Yangzongzhe. He taught him the highest Dai and his future is limitless. The head of the sect, when he heard these words, exclaimed that this was excellent. It meant that his son had the potential to become immortal. His assistant turned to the head of the sect and said that he should accept his congratulations. After which Elder Mu approached the sect leader and handed him a box. He said that this was a first-class Huayan pill, which his son asked him to give to his father. When everyone heard about this, they continued to congratulate Mr. Sect Leader on this pill. He will definitely break through to the stages of the embryonic soul. The head of the sect laughed. Then he added that his son had not forgotten about him. He took the box in his hands and said that today they had a double holiday, after which the head of the sect turned to the elder and asked, what about that monster? And what he heard was the answer that the elder would settle this issue along the way. The sect leader then said that if this is so, then this is wonderful, and thanked him. And he also said that if it were not for Elder Mu, who accurately determined the level of that monster, they would not have missed the chance to seize the resources of Xuantianzong. At that moment, there was a loud explosion. The head of the sect said that someone had broken through all their protective pharmacies. It was Ye when he landed right in front of them. He said, could this really be the Fangle sect? The head of the sect was simply furious. He shouted, who is this guy? Who dared to do this? Has he really become bored with life if he dared to break into the main hall of the Fangle sect? Despite all these loud words and threats, there was a young man in front of them who was smiling. After he landed, he said that he was ready to introduce himself, and his name was Ye Junling, and he came specifically to their Fangle sect. Everyone in this room immediately felt this powerful aura that this guy had, and it became clear to them all that he was at the stage of the embryonic soul. The system gave a notification that he had arrived at the registration site of the Fangle sect. It congratulated him that he had received the seal of the human ruler and the technique of the great void. The head of the Fangle sect thought that it was not that the guy was at the stage of the embryonic soul. His sect should not have attacked such powerful people, although his name seemed familiar to him. The guy said that he knows that they are pretending that they heard about him, about Ye, the head of the soaring peak. He said that they conspired and attacked his sect as punishment. The Fangle sect will cease to exist from this day on. Sect leader Fangle heard his name and said, this is the same one who was once caught off guard. How could he have entered the embryonic soul stage? He thought that if this guy is here, it means the king of Greenbirds has already been killed. After which the head of the Fangle sect turned his head to Elder Mu and asked him what they should do in such a situation. And to himself he thought that it wouldn't hurt for him to calm down while Elder Mu was with him. The elder told the young man that the puppy must fall on his knees and break his arms. Only then will he leave him his miserable life, and he must do it before he changes his mind. He looked at the old man and said that he did not understand who he was, and besides, he did not understand why he should bow to him. These words threw Elder Mu off balance. He prepared to attack this guy. He couldn't even imagine that he could be so bold. The elder stood there, ready to launch his attack because he believed that he was at a much higher stage than this guy. When the elder began his attack, it was simply impossible to resist. It seemed that there should not be a trace left of the young man. Everyone stood and watched because they knew that this elder was in the stage of spirit transformation, and when he starts to attack, it is just a terrible pressure. The sect leader thought that if he took on the matter at the stage of spirit transformation, then his fate was doomed by this guy Ye Junling from Xuantianzong. So he laughed. The sect leader said that last time he was able to survive, but this time he won't be able to. When he dies, his sect will have no support. He will easily crush them, so he had to fall to his knees alive and beg for mercy, in which case Elder Mu will leave his whole body. When the young man heard that Elder Mu was in the spirit transformation stage, he realized that this was his chance, and he had to take advantage of it once again. At the same time, in the place where Zhuantian Zong's spiritual vein passed, the head of the sect with his assistants was kneeling in front of him. There was a representative of the Fangle sect. The sect leader asked if the elder of the Yuhua sect was currently in the Fangle sect. The man who was kneeling in front of him at that moment lowered his head and smiled. He said that it was so. Do they really think that without the patronage of the Yuhua sect, they would dare to openly seize their sect together with this monster? The elder came to the Fangle sect because the crown prince of their sect entered the Yuhua sect, and thanks to his talent, he attracted a lot of attention. After which the representative of the Fangle sect added, although he does not know how they dealt with this monster, he advised them to stop. Maybe then they will be allowed to stay alive and serve the Fangle sect. The sect leader didn't think long. He swung and struck, killing the man. He added that they didn't have time. They needed to urgently go to the Fangle sect and save the head of Peak Ye. They had the impression that Ye could resist the Yuhua sect, to which the sect leader replied that it was impossible. The elder of the Yuhua sect was at least at the spirit transformation stage compared to Ye. He was at the embryonic soul stage. The head of the sect said that if necessary, he was ready to give his life if only the Yuhua sect would leave the head of Peak Ye alive, because he was their hope, and also he was his younger brother, and he thought that he would not dare to do something stupid. At this moment in the main hall of the Fangle sect, a young man was laughing at what Elder Mu had just said. The sect members thought that this guy was on the verge of death in front of the elder who had reached the stage of spirit transformation, and with his pitiful abilities, he was not even worthy of wearing shoes for Elder Mu. Sect leader Fangle said that this guy is a small cultivator from a wild region, and he does not dare to pour in his presence because his sect is no more than an anthill. And for the Yuhua sect, it is just a speck of dust that can be easily wiped off. Elder Mu clenched his fists and said if he had made him so angry, then even if he knelt down and apologized, he would still destroy his Zhuantian Zong sect. The young man listened to him attentively. He raised his hand and pointed 2 fingers at the old man. He told him if he thought so, then let him go ahead and crush him. Just don't waste time. And then the young man said that his stage of transformation of the spirit is just nonsense. If he is so cool, then he is ready to challenge him to a fight. Whoever runs away is the loser. These words simply angered Elder Mu. He pushed off from his place and took his step. While starting to attack the young man, he shouted, "Do you really want to die?" Then he added that after his death, Ye Junling, the sect he belongs to, will still remain their prey. At this moment, he received a notification that an enemy attack was detected after the spirit transformation stage. This was the 5th stage. At this moment, the passive effect of the force became stronger was activated, and cultivation at the peak of the spirit transformation stage was also obtained. Despite all the efforts of Elder Mu, the young man he wanted to destroy, and it seemed that he would be able to do it, but he did not succeed. He stretched out his hand forward, shouting that the transformation of the spirit is not really all that the elder is capable of, and that is all he wanted to show him at that moment. He repelled his attack. Elder Mu was very surprised. He couldn't even imagine this. Could it be that he was this guy? He was also at the stage of spirit transformation? The sect leader thought that some pathetic Zhuantian Zong, and suddenly they have such a master. This sect turned out to be incredibly insidious. It was not clear that in this poor wild region, there could be a local cultivator who had reached the stage of spirit transformation. It was clear that in the wild region, even an embryonic soul is enough to become the founder of a sect and ensure its existence for 1,000 years. But the stage of transformation of the spirit has never been here. And this guy was so young but had already reached such a level. The section leader approached the elder and asked him what they should do now. He asked them to save the Fangle sect, to which the elder answered him not to panic and not to forget that he was from the Yuhua sect. He answered him that the old man was of course right. If he thought that his technique was superior to his, at that moment he showed him his index finger. The elder shouted that this was all nonsense, and the level of such small sects as his was not comparable to such a great sect as Yuhua. Pushing off from the earth, the elder said that he wanted to teach him a lesson and show him the highest technique of the earth. This was one of the techniques he possessed, and it was called the Tai Green Tree Palm. Everyone else from the Fangle sect stood as if spellbound. They believed that the Yuhua sect did not bear its fame in vain. Such a technique of the earth was powerful, since the techniques of mortals, spiritual, mysterious, earthly, heavenly, divine in the wild region. They all thought that this guy would die now at the hands of the elder, and that it would be a great honor for him as a cultivator of his level. The young man stood there confidently. He was gathering his strength because he believed that these were just small tricks, and that this elder was nothing more than just bragging here. He decided to put the seal of the ruler of people on his technique, which everyone considered very complex and impressive. This technique of the seal of the ruler of people was several times greater than the technique that the elder had just tried to demonstrate. And this guy's strength was many times greater than the elder's. He not only repelled his attack, but he was also able to attack himself and show how much technique and strength he possessed. Everyone standing and watching these battles did not understand what kind of technique this was. Most likely, they thought it could be a heavenly level, or maybe a divine level, or maybe it was something more. Ye stretched his hand forward, looked at his opponent and left an imprint of radiance on the ground. This imprint was so powerful and so strong that it was unbearable to resist it, and the oldest did not have such a technique that he could do it. Immediately after Ye demonstrated one technique, he also showed another technique. The human lord was adamant. This was the finishing technique to finish off the elder. Elder Mu understood that this was a complete failure, and he could not resist this boy in any way, as he thought about him just a few minutes ago. He only caught himself thinking that he couldn't stay on his feet, and he didn't have any strength for this. He tried with all his might to resist this attack, but nothing worked for him. The elder stretched out both hands forward and shouted for the young man to wait and stop. Since he believed that this needed to be done for the sake of the Yuhua sect, he begged them to sit for him. Ye asked him again, what does it mean for the sake of the Yuhua sect? Then he added, if he is not touched, he never touches himself. If someone offends him, he will destroy him. They dared to attack his sect, so he will erase them. The elder tried to convey to the long man that if he died now, his sect would face complete destruction and he, as the culprit, would suffer even more. Ye laughed in his face and then said that before his death this old man could still threaten him and ordered him to disappear by stretching his hand forward and releasing his power. His power was so powerful that everyone present in this main hall could not help but be affected by his power. Sect leader Fangle could barely stand on his feet, so he immediately thought, you see, he no longer has any protection. He needed to do something. So he knelt down and tried with all his might to shout to the young man. He said that he was Lord E, and everything that happened was a misunderstanding. They were ready to obey and serve him. All the other representatives of this sect also fell to their knees and lowered their heads before him. They said that they would follow the ruler, and they would become his servants, to which the young man grinned and said that they were worthy even of being his dogs. The sect leader turned to the Lord and said that his son, Chen Xiao, has the potential to become an immortal. He has already been accepted into the Yuhua sect as the Lord's personal disciple, and he dared to offend him. He must not make mistakes. When Ye heard about this, he thought that his son had the makings of an immortal, and he found it very interesting. He told him that it was just perfect, and then added that he was ready to repeat it again. If he was offended, he would destroy the enemy. It was the Fangle sect that attacked his sect first, and he had already said everything they would cease to exist, and he would keep his word. Immediately after these words, he extended his hand and released his power towards them. He simply destroyed them all, wiping them off the face of the earth. Despite this, the head of the sect believed that this bloody insult that he received, and in which he would die, would be avenged 1,000 times more by his son. At least he hoped so. The small box that the son gave to the head of this sect was lying on the floor. The most annoying thing is that it was not used. E replied after the head of the sect made such a statement that he would wait for his son to come and bring him even more experience. He raised his head up and saw that a small number of people appeared in the sky and were very quickly approaching the place where he was. He wondered if it was a virtual nanny who had arrived for him. The head of his sect, when he saw E alive, said that it was simply wonderful that his younger brother was still alive and he was glad that they had time. E answered him that he doesn't understand where else he should be, because when he left, he said that he was going to destroy the Fangle sect. After listening to the end, his older brother grabbed his hand and tried to take him away from that place as quickly as possible. He said that his younger brother was incredibly lucky because he heard that the elder of the Yuhua sect had arrived in the Fangle sect. He wanted to know him somehow. It was not the point since they could still leave. E pulled his hand out of his older brother's hand. He didn't look up at him, asked if he really thought and spoke about that elder, so if he was worried, then he had already killed him. His elder brother and the sect leader was very surprised that he had really destroyed the elders of the Yuhua sect. After all, he was at the stage of spirit transformation, The girl accompanying him noticed that she had already said that the head of Peak Yi was able to handle this. The sect leader asked if this was true, and Ye had overcome the transformation of the spirit. To which Ye replied that he was also in the stage of transformation of the spirit. Then he added that they needed to go rob the Fangle sect in order to replenish their resources. The head of the sect replied that his younger brother, of course, did not go to rob the sect that they had taken over at that moment. He was thinking that his younger brother was at the stage of spirit transformation. It was simply unbelievable. When they went outside, one of their assistants said to the head of the sect that he had found a pill of the embryonic soul, and it seemed to be from the Yuhua sect. When he heard about this, he said that this pill should be given to the head of the sect so that he could quickly break through to the stage of the embryonic soul. This would strengthen Xuantianzong. At this moment, he received a message from the system that a suitable disciple had been found within a radius of 100 li. It seemed that he was the head of a demonic cult at the level of a true immortal, so he needed to be accepted as a disciple and receive an unimaginable reward. Yi thought that it was great that he had a new task, and this was a disciple of the head of a demonic cult of the level of a true immortal. If he challenged, then thanks to his ability, he might immediately become immortal. Yi turned around and went to see what he could take from this sect and what could benefit him. The girl said that only thanks to the head of Peak Ye they managed to wipe out the Fangle sect. But after quarreling with the Yuhua sect, their sect only had a chance to survive in the eastern region. After which he called his younger brother Ye, who stopped and turned his head and looked at the sect leader. The sect leader told his younger brother that his talent was incredible and he shouldn't ruin his future here. It's better to leave the eastern region. When the Yuhu sect comes for answers, they will simply sacrifice themselves. His two assistants also believed that the sect leader was right, since the head of Peak E was a natural-born genius, and his death in this place would be a huge loss. Everyone else started to support them and say that Peak Head Yi would definitely be able to fulfill their hopes of making their sect famous again. They would stay and stand until the very end and not retreat. They convinced him that he could boldly go to his destiny. These words surprised the young man a little. He didn't even expect to hear such words after everything he had done and how they believed him. The young man thought that this was some kind of sect, some kind of powerful unity, and he should not let them down. So he went to his older brother and said that he thanks everyone for their support, but they need to be sure that if he decided, it means he thought it all out. The rest, they should leave it to him and he will sort it out. Yi said that he leaves everything here to the head of their sect, and they must sort it out here without haste. He has urgent matters and he is forced to take his leave. After which he did not hear any answer. He disappeared from this place. The head of the sect only thought that his younger brother wins every time. Then he waves his sleeve and leaves without leaving even a cloud. You even time in another part where there was a forest of purple bamboo very quickly flashed someone's shadow. Only it was visible that she was dressed in red. That's why a girl ran away from the forest, because someone was chasing her, and that someone was laughing and telling her that she, a beauty, should not run away and let him enjoy her. The girl, in turn, was very upset and shouted at him to get out. She had already told him many times that she was a man. But the pursuer seemed not to hear her. He caught up with her very quickly and kept repeating that she was a girl and she was so beautiful. How could a man be? She was most likely just deceiving him. At that moment, he thought that the tiger had already entered the plain and became a victim of dogs. Oh, just think. He is the head of the demonic cult from the central region who has achieved true immortality, and it was he who founded the giant Baiwo sect. But his enemies united with the forces of the Holy Lands and launched a full-scale siege of Baihuo. In order to escape, he had to sacrifice all his strength, and now he's hiding in this backwater area. The monster that was chasing him shouted to him that the beauty, if she didn't run faster, he would definitely catch her. Turning around, he stopped and used one of the techniques. It was a shield of scarlet flame. Using this force, he tried to stop his pursuer and destroy him, but he could do it with his last strength. When he used this technique, he was thrown back a short distance. It seemed that he had accomplished the task. But he was so weak that after this reception and after this attack, he felt bad and started coughing. Another person was watching him from the side. He thought that some stage of laying the foundation that this guy possessed was able to withstand his technique of 5 yokes, the origins of the late Golden Core stage. Watching him, he did not understand whether this young talent was from a large sect who had gone on a journey, and he thought that first he should deal with him. Fire a few metal rods at him that surround this guy on all sides so that he can't move. The very next moment, this guy was standing in the center and there was a field around him. He was surrounded. The pursuer jumped right in front of him, laughed, and told the guy that she was a beauty, that's all. Better give up. The young man thought that it was some damn dog the stalker spoke because he thought that he was a beauty. So that he wouldn't resist since his patience was not unlimited, he added that he should resign himself to it. It wouldn't take much time. The young man's eyes darkened, he tensed up, and thought that the only right decision was to prove that he was not a beauty at all. So he opened the clothes he was wearing and showed that underneath were ordinary pumped-up male chests. Then he told this follower to open his dog eyes. He is a man. The pursuer's screams made it seem like even the birds in the area and their feathers were falling to the ground. Only at that moment did this pervert realize that he really was a man, which meant he was running after him in vain. Then the young man told him again to look carefully, since they were the same Paul, and so he should stop running after him. The pervert raised his hand and told the guy to stop. Another thought appeared in his head. He said that although he already knows that there is a man here, this is also not bad. Most likely it is even better this way. The young man shouted at him to go away. The vile pervert even started to pick on men. After which, he said that he would rather burn his inner pearl than humiliate himself in front of him. His opponent wanted to know what kind of technology and how the foundation, too, he possessed, could create such large-scale formations. To which the young man shouted at him that he was a damn dog, and he finally got angry. After which the young man concentrated all his strength and decided to use them, and stretched out his two hands and directed all his strength towards his opponent, while he shouted, "Die!" When this pervert realized that he couldn't resist him, he started screaming for him to stop, and he was ready to discuss everything with him. But it was too late. When this force reached its goal, it destroyed him and threw him aside. Even though this guy had a very low level of only 2, he was able to concentrate and use a technique that was higher than his opponent's level. The young man, barely alive, tried to get up and tidy himself up. He told his opponent that he had asked for it. Then when he stood up, he thought that it was bad luck. Because of this incident, his pearl was almost split. He urgently needed to find a place to restore it in order to think about further steps. At that moment, the young man heard someone's laughter and a voice that said that this pervert did not die in vain, and the guy was definitely from an unusual family. The young man quickly stood up on 2 legs, turned around, looked. He wanted to know who else was there. Hearing the approaching footsteps, he still didn't know who he would meet and what to expect from this person. When this man approached, he saw an old man who told him not to worry. He just happened to be in this place and he has no connection with that pervert. And by the way, his preferences are normal, so he can be calm. The young man said that this was good, in which case he hoped to see him again someday, and said goodbye to the old man. But this old man was not going to say goodbye to the young man so easily. He took a step forward. The guy tensed up at that moment. The old man began to talk about the fact that, however, unlike that perverted man, he's more interested in the secrets that this guy is hiding. After which he said to let him look into his mind. He wanted to understand why he had such powerful abilities, to which the young man answered that he was using the weaknesses of others. Death awaited him. And the young man thought to himself that he had no strength left and that his rebirth would really end here and he could not come to terms with it. At that moment, he heard some kind of crackling that was coming from very close by. He still didn't understand what had happened. He thought that it was most likely someone else. Raising his head up, he saw that another person was approaching the place where they were, and they did not understand who it was. The old man turned his head and immediately saw that this man had the stage of transformation of the spirit. He thought that most likely he was being mocked, as in this eastern region, there could be a master at the stage of transformation of the spirit. But after a few seconds, he saw this master of spirit transformation in front of him. The old man understood that his end had come. That's why he dropped down and sat on one knee in front of the man who was at the level of spirit transformation and immediately asked for mercy. He pointed at the guy and said that he was his and he was going to leave now. And when he went down, he pointed his index finger at him and said that such worthless people don't deserve to live. After which he hit this old man using the force he had in order to destroy this scoundrel. The young man remained standing in place. He thought that first he had been infected with the Golden Core Master who was at the 3rd level. Now the transformation of the spirit was already the 5th level. Could it really be that today he really could not escape his fate? He thought the system definitely said that this head of the demonic cult and also a true immortal, in fact it was an ordinary weakling at the stage of laying the foundation. It was the 2nd level. He asked the system it is not mocking. The system told him that it was not deceiving him. He really was a true immortal and the head of a demonic cult. He needed to activate his abilities for the Eye of Insight. Then he would see that this was Hong Qianye and he was a true immortal. When E was there once again convinced, he understood that everything was as the system had indicated to him. Approached the young man. He noticed snow-white skin, refined features. Long hair, many women envied him, and anyone could have mistaken his gender. The guy thought that this one was looking at him with a strange look. Maybe he also prefers men. E thought that although this guy is now at the stage of laying the foundation, this is the second level. With his talent and experience, it will be easy to return to his former strength. Accepting him as a disciple was a win-win option. So he turned to this guy and said that he saw that he had an exceptional bone structure and that he was a real talent. And from that day on, he was taking him on as a student and asked if he agreed. The young man was a little scared and asked again what he had just said and whether he really wanted to take him as a student. And he thought to himself whether he really should also hunt for his talents, since his artifacts and his luck really could not compare with what was said about him. At that moment, the young man thought that this was all a hoax, since with his cultivation, they wouldn't even let him into the backyards of his sect. And he was at some stage of spiritual transformation. He was at the 5th level, and this man wanted to be his teacher. He was just naive. He then asked the guy what he thought about all this, and judging by his face, he doesn't really want to be his student. The young man thought that although this E was not worthy of being his teacher, in this situation, he did not have the strength to resist everyone around him, and while there was a chance for survival, it was not worth it. He sat down on his knees, lowered his head, said that the student greets his mentor, added that being a student of such a mentor is the greatest honor in his life. He thought that anyway, it is just a game. And when the time comes, he will definitely regain his lost dignity, despite the fact that he now lowers his head and humiliates himself in front of others. Ye answered him that in front of him was a very good student of his. He told him to rise from his knees as quickly as possible, and from that day on he would call him Xiao Hong. For the young man, it was very unexpected in this name and the fact that he had to come to terms with it. But he closed his eyes and said that he agreed with the mentor. He looked at his student and thought that this guy was too obviously hypocritical, but nothing with his ability to meet the force. I become stronger. He was not afraid of his betrayal. A message came about the completion of the task of accepting a student. For this reward is the automatic training function, and the reward is the coffin of the burying heaven containing 108 prohibitions that will be removed as the owner's level increases. Now this is a 3rd level artifact. Abilities have stages of mastering: the initial level, partial mastery, complete mastery, and mastery. At each stage of strength and effect can increase 10 times more, and the ability to bury the heavens and earth, destroying all creatures at later stages, can absorb the entire world. Another message came that the talent of the master's disciple was discovered. The system offers a free upgrade package. The reward is a fire technique, 3,000 flames of flame. Another message from the system was given to him: a pill source of fire to restore the fire root and form an unrivaled task completed. He thought that this reward was clearly created to challenge the laws of the worldview. Of course, he thought that this was a real reward that the great traveler from the Celestial Empire deserved. The student thought that his mentor, this guy, is very proud that he took a talented student like him. He thought that it looks like his retribution is just around the corner. E turned to the student asking if he was hiding his emotions, to which the student replied that his mentor most likely misunderstood this usual expression of his face. In fact, he thought that this guy was only at the 5th stage of spirit transformation and was already trying to teach him about life. E for the fiery book in his hands and thought that it seemed that without a gift, this guy would not accept his authority. So he told him to hold the technique in honor of their apprenticeship and study hard. The student thanked his mentor, but to himself, he thought that he needed to see what kind of nonsense this provincial master at the stage of spirit transformation could offer him. When he took this fiery book in his hands, he thought that its title, 3,000 Fiery Flames, was too much, and it looked very pretentious. Holding it in his hands, he did not understand what this book meant, and he was not going to treat it as something very important. But what was his surprise what kind of book it was, and the next moment he did not understand how it was possible. After all, this book described the technique of violent rage flame, with the help of which he achieved immortality. This technique is already considered the highest fire technique of the central region. But compared to this 3,000 flame, it is just trash. This technique completely turned his understanding of fire magic upside down. This is definitely an immortal level technique, and maybe even a legendary saint level technique. The student thought that with this technique his strength would grow incredibly. Returning to true immortality no longer satisfied him. At that moment told his student that judging by his face he was pleased with the technique he had been given. The guy thanked for the equipment. It turned out to be extremely useful, and he thought to himself where this guy got such luck to stumble upon such a rare equipment. After which the mentor said if his student mastered this technique, he gave him another pill to help. The young man was very surprised because it was the source of fire. He thought that the source of fire is a divine pill for cultivators of fire techniques. It gives an incredible effect that even immortals are ready to fight for it. And most importantly, he did not understand how such a master of the spirit transformation stage, who was at the 5th level, could obtain these things. Even in his best years, he could not achieve such a thing. Ye turned to his student Xiao Hong. He wanted to clarify whether he doubted his teacher's gift, to which his student replied that he was glad to be a student of such a person. For him, it was the greatest honor, and he thought that his mentor did not understand how rare the technique was, and that he probably accidentally found the pill in the ancient heritage. In turn thought that this was the head of the demonic cult constantly coming up with something by changing his facial expression, and at the same time the thing is that he just has a funny look. Ye told his disciple to take the pill and he himself would guard him at that moment. The young man thanked his mentor. The very next moment he took out that very pill and opening his mouth, put it in. All that was left was to wait for it to work. Stood in front of this guy and watched what was happening to him and how before his eyes he instantly began to change and all his strength changed. At first the guy had the initial stage of laying the foundation, then full mastery, then the golden core, then the embryonic soul. He thought that the guy was really a true immortal, recreating the powers of half an hour, and he reached the embryonic soul. The young man himself thought when he started coming always that it was simply unbelievable that he had broken through so quickly. Returning to the central region, he would definitely be able to wash away all his shame. Unexpectedly for the young man himself, he could not hold back and a burp came out of his mouth, after which he covered his mouth and asked for forgiveness from the mentor. He said that he had disturbed him. It was impolite of him. Replied that there was nothing strange about it, that they needed to go back to the sect. He wanted to introduce him to the elders. At the main hall of Zhuantianzong, there were conversations about how Chief Ye had incredibly destroyed the embryonic soul with one finger, saving their sect from complete destruction twice. People stood and looked at him that he had power. He probably had high standards for students. They were happy that the head of Peak E had returned. They wanted to know who was with him, this beautiful girl. Everyone asked themselves where such a beauty came from and why she was so close to the head of Peak E. Disciple Ye, when he came down to the ground, thought that this clan was cultivating too weak, and these people were not even fit to become servants in his Bai Huo. The head of the sect, when he saw his younger brother, rushed to him and asked who was with him. And unexpectedly for everyone, I put my hand on the young man's shoulder. For everyone it was incomprehensible. Then Ye, so that there would be no more talk, said that this was his new disciple and his name was Xiao Hong. He told his disciple to greet the head of the sect. The head of the sect and his elder brother were very indignant when they heard this. What does it mean, disciple? His assistant did not accept how the head of Peak E could take such a beautiful girl as a student. She was very outraged. Then Xiao Hong interrupted the conversation. He approached the girl and said that she didn't think so. In fact, he is a man. The girl was a little shocked because student Ye had the level of the embryonic soul, and it was much higher than her level. Turned to his student and told him to control himself. This is actually his older sister, and he should apologize immediately. Xiao Hong approached his mentor's elder sister and asked her for forgiveness. At this moment, he thought that he needed to endure a little longer. When he reached the stage of spirit transformation, he would take revenge for this humiliation. Told his student that he was a good guy, and if everyone got to know his student, then he would take him to the floating peak. The head of the sect said that he agreed. The sect leader said that his younger brother had taken in a cultivator at the embryonic soul stage as a disciple. It was the 4th level. It was simply unbelievable. In one day, their younger brother had brought so much amazing news to their sect. After some time, they were already there, that is. They were already on that very hovering peak. Said that the young man is his first student, so he should choose any room on this peak and should not be shy. When the disciple saw this building which was on the peak, he thought what kind of a hole it was. Even the servants' rooms in his sect were luxurious. He wondered if he would really have to live in such a place. At that moment, the teacher seemed to bless his thoughts, saying that the student should remember that only the weak learn to adapt, and then added that a cultivator should be above such things. He thought that if this room was dirty, then his student should clean it himself. The student thought that he could endure with his speed of development soon, everything would change. He waited together to take revenge on his mentor. Even time in the southern region where the Yuhua sect was located in the main hall, a man came to report to the head of the sect. The head of the sect held in his hands a tablet on which his power was written, and it was all in cracks. They were in the hall of the heirs of Jiang Zhongzhe. The man asked his mentor to forgive him here. He asked Elder Mu to take the pill to his father. This guy said that after Elder Mu's death, he was very worried that his father and his sect might suffer, and he wanted to personally check the situation. The head of the sect asked Xiao if he knew why he took him as a disciple, and he had an answer to that. The young man said that it was most likely because of his solar immortal body or because of his immortality potential. The head of the sect said that this was only part 2. The reason he saw in him was huge ambition, and his desire for power should not be limited by ties of kinship. He continued to speak and said that there was little time left before the competition for the middle-aged students. He had to prepare. The head of the sect said that if he could defeat other students and become the best, then the sect would increase support for him, and this would be his chance. The young man tried to object. But the head of the Sai said that there are none, but he will send the eastern region to check the situation, and his task is to focus on victory. After which Xiao told his mentor that he understood everything and he would not let him down. He would do everything as his mentor wanted. The next day, on the hovering Pimei of Xiantianzong, Teacher Ye sat in a rocking chair with his eyes closed as if he were sleeping. After he opened his eyes, he shouted to his disciple Xiao Hong that he had been waiting for him for a long time. Was he really not ready yet? His student said that he was ready and would bring everything. He walked with a rant. He thought that his mentor only had food in his head. He did not understand how this master of the stage of transformation of the spirit yesterday, he gave him a lecture on adaptation. He took a bite and thought that this meat and these women were just a miracle. It was just delicious. The spices from the system were just a masterpiece. After which the mentor told his student to try and not be shy. The student told the mentor that he had long ago reached a state where he could not eat food, and he was no longer interested in it. Then Ye looked at the guy. He said, is he really refusing his mentor? He noted that in cultivation, you also need to enjoy life, and told him to try at least a piece. His student then said, okay, and he is ready to do it. His student thought that his mentor was a very strange guy. He did not understand what could be so special about this food. But when he took a bite, he immediately realized that it was just an incredible taste, something he had never tasted or experienced before. He sat there worried, thinking how delicious it was. He didn't understand why he couldn't feel such happiness since childhood. When Mentor E saw that his student even started to cry because it was so delicious, he said that there was no need to just cry. His student thought about how as a child he was always hungry and dreamed of trying a piece of meat at least once. And when he had such a moment in childhood when he first ate, it was a happiness that cannot be described in words. But the verse, since he stood on the bullet at cultivation, he forgot how someone it is to simply live and enjoy simple things. His mentor was right. If cultivation deprives you of simple joys, then what is the point of it? Mentor Ye is very surprised his student broke through again. And this was not an embryonic soul at all. It was a transformation of the spirit. This guy even managed to level up on food. He had talent. Xiao Hong turned and looked at his mentor. He felt that he already had a completely different strength. The young man thought that he had not expected the transition to the stage of transformation of the spirit to the 5th level to happen so quickly. He decided that it seemed like it was time for him to end his student connection with this country. The mentor sat in a chaise lounge and told his student that his massage technique was getting better and better. The student in turn thanked the mentor despite the fact that they were both at the same stage of spiritual transformation. Teacher Ye suddenly stood up from his chair and told his student that it was a very good day, and for his student's good behavior he would take him to an amazing place. Don't waste your time. They didn't immediately go to that amazing place. The student followed his mentor. He wondered if they had finally gone to where his mentor had received his great legacy. Suddenly, Chen Xiao, who was at the peak stage of spirit transformation, joined them. The guy said, do they really want to go to that place? After all, they are cultivators at the spirit transformation stage from the wild region. He thought that this guy was at the peak stage of spirit transformation. It was a good catch. He would be able to raise his level to look worthy where they were currently heading. He decided to provoke a scandal, shouted to the guy that he was an energetic guy, and he was going there. But without servants, he would be bored. To which Chen Xiao replied that he most likely wanted to die. He decided this was his chance, and that the guy could attack and show his strength. The system reported that an attack by an enemy of the peak stage of spirit transformation was detected. The passive effect was activated, meeting the power. I become stronger. The power of the initial stage of fusion was obtained. E, at that moment, applied the seal of influence over the earth, and also he applied the technique of the ruler of people not yet loved. This guy simply had no chance to survive. His student thought that this mentor was not so simple. He was already at the fusion stage, and this was the 6th level. He thought how much more he could hide his true strength from him, so he decided that it would be much more difficult to deal with him than he thought. At this moment, the mentor said that they had almost arrived. This was a place unattainable even for him, his disciple, and the former head of a demonic cult of the true immortality level. At this moment, his disciple wondered if this was really the secret world with the heavenly inheritance. Mentor E said that they needed to go, and it was time for his student to expand his horizons, after which they headed through the portal to that very place. In just a second, they were on the other side, and they were in the very place where E was going to go. The first thing they heard was an appeal to everyone who was there, telling them that the inexpensive heroes should take their places because the 10th anniversary meeting was about to begin. None of them should miss it. He had told his disciple Xiao Hong should stick to it because he will have something to learn from it. His disciple thought that although this is not a secret world with heavenly inheritance, but this place is completely beyond his imagination. For a long time, Mentor Ye continued to sit in the lounge chair. He told his disciple Xiao Hong that he had already eaten meat and raised his level. Now he should come up to him and massage his shoulders again. His student thought that his mentor did not understand that he was already at the stage of transformation of the spirit. It was the 5th level, and he was still trying to command him. At some point, his student could not restrain himself and thought that the moment had come to take revenge on his mentor. But at that very moment, a servant arrived with a report to the head of Peak E. This messenger said that the head of the sect asks him to go to the meeting hall, and also the head of the sect says that there is an important matter to discuss. E was very surprised because only one day had passed and he already had a new job. His student was just Zoe. He thought that the beads had such a chance, but he wouldn't miss it next time, and his mentor always had a lot of weak spots, and he would still have time. Xiao Hong couldn't bear such an insult. He started shouting, "How dare you treat me like that?" He thought he should have been killed right then and there. After some time, a large number of representatives of this sect had gathered in the Zhuantianzong Assembly Hall. Everyone was discussing what to do and whether this was a sign that the heavens wanted to destroy their sect. At this very moment, the head of Peak E arrived. The head of the sect was glad that his younger brother arrived immediately. E, ask your older brother and the head of the sect what happened this time. Is there really some kind of threat again? The head of the sect said that several years ago they came under their protection. The state of Wei received a message that strange events are happening throughout the country, as a result of which people are dying en masse. They talked about how the corpses looked creepy. They were completely drained of blood. These phenomena are becoming more and more frequent, covering huge territories. Some cities have died out. The head of the sect said that he assumed that this was the work of demons and sent students to that place to investigate. But so far, none of them have returned. And when he woke up in the morning, a new message came. The situation had worsened. The phenomenon was spreading to neighboring states. If this continues, the entire wild region will end up in chaos. In addition, the head of the sect added that their sect will lose potential students, which will lead to its weakening. Listen to everything that was said above. E replied, "Is it really that serious and no one saw who is behind this?" His elder sister said that if the situation continues to develop, their sect may fall into decline. The wild region is already poor in cultivators. Even the 4th level soul birth stage is rare here. Ye asked everyone what kind of enemy was so strong that they couldn't even get an answer from the students. At that moment, he received a message that a new task had been activated. He needed to find the source of the problem in the state of Wei and eliminate it. E thought that the system sent him a new task in time, after which he turned to his older brother and said that he understood everything. If the phenomenon began in the state of Wei, then the source of evil is located there. The head of the sect and his elder brother said that this is very good. His younger brother Ye always acts decisively and he is confident that he will cope. They will wait for good news. He did not have time to finish speaking as Ye had already gone to that very place. His elder sister said that he is very decisive. One of the people of the sect wondered if Ye could handle such a mysterious threat, to which his elder sister replied Does he really doubt that there is no one in the wild region who could defeat a master of the 5th-level spirit transformation stage? Everyone understood that she was speaking correctly. If he couldn't handle it, then the wild region could really perish. The head of the sect said that everyone should continue training and that they should live up to the expectations of the younger brother E. After some time, Ye and his disciple were in the eastern region of the wild region on the border of the state of Wei. His student, moving behind his mentor, did not understand why after the meeting his mentor immediately sent him to this poor state, but he decided that along the way, he would be able to find a way to deal with the mentor. After some time, they were in the eastern region of the wild region of the state of Wei in the village of Taohua. Ye, watching what was happening, saw that the bandits were robbing the village. He decided that it was necessary to intervene. His student thought that these were some trifles. The people of this village told the bandits that they were respected heroes, but their village was very poor, and they only had chickens, ducks, cows, and sheep. If they needed something they could only take, they had to spare innocent people. The man to whom the innocent inhabitants of this village turned simply laughed at them and did not want to listen to any of their explanations. He laughed and answered them that he didn't need their animals. He only needed them. This was the leader of the Black Wind Gang, who terrified the residents by not sitting in any of the people. The leader of the Black Wind Gang told the people to fix themselves, and only this can affect the fact that they can die without pain. The residents who tried to resist him at some point thought that they needed to run away because the leader of the Black Wind Gang was using his technique. His technique was bloody. People screamed for help to save them and asked not to kill them. Little children told their mothers that they were afraid they saw a monster in front of them and asked for someone to save them. Xiao Hong, his mentor's disciple, did not understand what kind of technique this was. He thought that it was similar to one technique from the central region, but then the person who possessed it had already died when he was destroyed by the Holy Lands. Ye asked his disciple if he knew this technique. His student replied that it seemed strange to him that he began to talk to his mentor very arrogantly, to which Yi pulled him and said that he had no right to talk to his teacher like that. People ran away from the leader of the Black Wind Gang in different directions. They shouted that they did not want to die. Yi jumped from behind the head of the gang of Black Wind and put his hand on his shoulder. He told him to stop immediately. The gang leader abruptly turned his fist and swung it to strike. He wanted to ask the stranger who he was and how he dared to interfere in his affairs. He began to say that he would die immediately. But everything went completely differently. The fist that was supposed to kill E stopped him with the help of his strength. E stopped him. He completely restrained all the actions of this Black Wind Gang leader so that he couldn't even move. E said that he needed to be calm because they needed to discuss something. His opponent at that moment could not move, and he was completely bleeding. The bandits who were together with the leader of the Black Wind Gang stopped not understanding what had happened and what had happened to their leader. The head of the gang began to shout at the master in the spirit transformation stage to spare him. Ye needed to know where he was from. Then this man said that he was a guard of the palace of the state of Wei, but one day he saw something that he should not have seen. He was sentenced to death for it, and he fled from the palace to save himself. The gang leader said that he noticed that the crown prince was secretly visiting the mountains behind the palace, but did not dare to check this equipment he received from a mysterious organization when he was on the run, and their origin is unknown to him. The gang leader started saying that they asked to use this technique to absorb people's blood to increase his strength. He did it for survival. He didn't know anything else. E, after listening to him to the end, said that it looks like there is a huge organization behind all this, and your actions are possibly connected with all these strange phenomena. His student thought that the teaching methods remind him too much of one person. Is he still here? And why is he here in the wild region? When the mentor asked his student what he thought, he automatically answered that he knew nothing, but in fact, he understood whether he was really behind all this. If so, then his mentor would not be able to cope with this person, and the state of Wei would be his end. E approached the head of the team and put his hand on his head and said that he would now find out if he had told him everything, after which he looked straight into his eyes and saw that very picture. He then realized that everything was exactly like that. He was doing this only in order to survive. After which he let go of the gang leader and he fell to the ground. Yes said that this bandit really didn't lie, but in fact he didn't mention something very important, and therefore they urgently need to go to the Wei Imperial Palace. His student, unexpectedly for everyone, and even for the mentor, without asking him, used the power and technique that he possessed. This is the fire technique. He pointed it towards the bandits who were trying to destroy this village, and all these bandits were burned alive. Mentor Yeo and all the other villagers were a little surprised. They didn't expect such a turn of events. The student, without turning to his teacher, said, "Did his student do something wrong? Didn't these bandits deserve to die?" And to himself he thought, he had endured all the humiliations of the teacher for so long that he took out his anger on someone. It was like manna from heaven. His mentor said that he was a good guy and he did everything right. People began to shout that the two immortals who drove out the villains and used the will of heaven will forever remain in the hearts of the villagers. At the same time, in another part where the palace of the state of Wei was located, the emperor was sitting in its main hall. The emperor of this state said that in recent years the population of his state had decreased by a third. A little more and his entire country would be destroyed by this darkness. He was interested in whether the masters of Xuantianzong would be able to help them. Unexpectedly for everyone, the silence in this hall was interrupted by someone's very loud voice. It was his daughter. She was running and screaming, addressing her father. The girl was in a hurry to tell her father that she had seen two immortals and that these two were flying to the palace. The emperor stood up from his throne and said that these were probably the masters from Xuantianzong, and he quickly ordered all the ministers to go with him to meet them. When all the ministers and the emperor went out into the street, they saw two masters approaching them. Mentor E asked his student how he could come up with such an effective solution, to which his student said that he was a very wise mentor, and that was impressive. And to himself he thought, let's see how he will get out of it if these forces find out about him. Only then should he not ask him for help. The emperor and his ministers began to greet the masters. They were happy that help had come to them. Ye said that he is the head of the soaring peak of Xuantianzong. His name is Ye Junling, and he came to help them eliminate the threat. He said that they no longer have anything to fear. The emperor in turn replied that on behalf of the Wei people they express gratitude to them immortals. He asked if they have any wishes. Then they should say they will fulfill everything. Yi answered the emperor that they should organize a place for him and his disciple to rest. The emperor answered that he would do it without problems. They should follow him. He himself decided to conduct them. The mentor and his student obediently followed the emperor. First of all, they wanted to understand what the situation was like here. The person who was watching them thought that some head of Xuantianzong Peak was just pretending to be powerful, and he also thought that it was good that they needed sacrifices for his master so that he could reach the peak of 5th-level spirit transformation. They came just in time. When they were left in the room where they could rest, the mentor lay down on the sofa and his student thought that his mentor had just looked respectable, and now he was so lazy he thought that with this approach he could soon overtake him in level. Then it would be easier for him to eliminate him. Mentor Ye in turn thought about his student, that his cunning plans would sooner or later turn against him. At that moment, he threw one shoe off his foot. The mentor realized that the student was making a mistake in choosing his mentor as his main target. At this point, Mentor E asked his student. He was most likely interested in how he was training, after which he told him to bring water so that he could wash his feet, and if he was comfortable, he would teach him his method. His student was furious at such humiliation. He asked again what he said. He did not understand. Some master from a remote place tried to teach him cultivation. At one time, the immortal learned from him. The mentor looked at his student and asked what he was worth. Does he really not want to continue cultivating? After all, he is still young. Does he really want to continue relying on his elders? At that moment, his student thought that he, the greatest head of the fire cult, should wash the feet of someone like him. He thought that maybe it was time to end this farce, and unexpectedly for himself, he tried to object. But this time again, he was not allowed to do it to the end. Someone came into their room and said that two immortals addressed them. He had important information about strange phenomena in the state of harmony. Ye looked at the stranger and asked who he was. The stranger said that he was the crown prince of the state of Wei. His name was Zhao Heng. What he knew concerned the fate of the entire country, and he asked them to listen to him. He asked this guy to come in. He wanted to know what his urgent matter was and why he dared to disturb him. This crown prince stood in front of them the next moment. This was the same prince who wanted to destroy those bandits, but he did not look like what they said about him, although it was unclear whether this was really the case. The prince knelt down, lowered his head, and began to speak, addressing the immortals, that there was one secret that he had never told his father. He suspected that the source of evil in the state of harmony was connected to the mountains behind the palace. He continued to talk about how recently at night he saw several flying demons that secretly flew into the cave, and in recent days court maids and eunuchs often disappear. He thought that it was all connected. The prince said that he had heard of their fame, and knew that only they were capable of saving the people of the state of harmony. He asked them to destroy these flying demons in the mountains. Yi thought about everything that this prince said, because in fact he did not feel any threat in the mountains to the divine creation, this man either, or he has protection that can cause him a problem. Yi, without thinking twice, told the prince that he could help him and that he should show him the cave, and to himself he thought that he needed to see what he had planned. The prince rose from his knees and pointed to the doors. He thanked the immortals and told them to follow him. With their help, they would definitely get rid of evil in the state of harmony. The mentor student was a little disappointed. He looked at his teacher and thought that they would now go on this matter, but then he would definitely talk to him. When Ye and his disciple followed the prince's younger sister was watching them from the palace and was very surprised to see her older brother. She knew that her older brother was behaving disgustingly, and the emperor had warned him more than once, but he had no intention of improving, and the worst thing was that he dared to meet with the masters in secret. She thought that she needed to tell her father urgently. After some time, the prince and the two immortals who followed him were in the Ye Mountains. Unexpectedly for the crown prince, this place did not look like the dwelling place of flying demons. The crown prince did not answer. He said that they had already arrived and stopped. It was even interesting that he also told the crown prince that he could finally see what he was hiding here. The crown prince replied that he did not even hope to deceive him, but he did not expect that he would be so easily led and come to this place. He was too confident in his abilities. After which the crown prince turned around and started attacking Ye. He said, "Does he really think he can stop them? And thinks that being the strongest sect master is being a god. He wanted to see how Yi can deal with him." At this moment, the crown prince raised his head and shouted as loud as he could for the elders to take action. It seemed that the elders were expecting him to come, and at that moment, as soon as they were given the signal, they used the technique of the fivefold god sealing array. One of the elders turned to the leader of the Wei sect. He said that recently he had dealt with the demon king, the birth of the soul. It was the elder of the blood cult, the late stage of the birth of the soul. He believed that in the fivefold array of sealing the gods, even the masters of the spirit transformation stage would not be able to escape. The crown prince said that he should not be killed immediately. He is needed, and the girl who was with him in red should simply be deprived of her powers. The crown prince looked at the master's disciple and said that he would like to enjoy her. He, like many others, thought that Xiaoheg was a girl. This greatly offended the disciple of the mentor Yi. He could not forgive this, and therefore anger and rage appeared in his eyes. He asked again and said something. The next moment, he vented his anger in flame techniques. He said that he did not want to interfere, but the crown prince violated all boundaries. His technique was so powerful that there was nothing alive left in the radius. He simply burned everything around. The crown prince doesn't fully understand what happened. He thought she destroyed his array with one blow. He still didn't understand that it wasn't a girl. Trying to save himself, the crown prince began to retreat back. He did not understand how this was possible and how he was able to break through this fivefold array sealed by the gods. The elders asked the crown prince if Peak Ye's leader had brought a spirit transformation stage disciple with him, and they believed that her technique was clearly an immortal level. Otherwise, she would not have been able to destroy their array. The crown prince was furious. He thought that the elder would not be able to bring glory to his master, but he failed. His plan failed. The crown prince, addressing the student as a girl, said that he was ready to negotiate with her with the immortal. If she with her strength joins his Mao, then a brilliant future awaits her. The disciple of the mentor could not forgive such an insult. He shouted at the prince, "How dare he talk to him like that, and he will make him suffer." After which he sent a fireball towards the newly found prince, which was supposed to destroy him. The very next moment, the next prince was completely on fire. He was burning alive. At this moment, Mentor Ye was watching this whole scene and told his disciple that it was the crown prince who had touched his disciple on the raw. After which he asked his student to stop and not kill him, as he still needed to ask him a couple of questions. Xiao Heng listened to his mentor this time and stopped slowly roasting the crown prince. The crown prince, when he realized that he had been defeated, tried to get up, but at that moment he realized that his plan had failed. Ye then asked the prince who his master was, and he said that his master was the greatest immortal from the central region, and he must immediately submit to him. Otherwise, when he appears, you will not even be able to beg for death. Yi answered him that there was no talk of conquering. He would see how long his master would hide, since he would start killing their people one by one. Yi turned towards one of the elders and killed him with one blow. After which the elder said that this guy was also at the stage of transforming a fifth-level spirit. He did not understand how a sect from a wild region could have two such masters at once. Having finished these words, he received a blow from E, and in the next moment he was lying dead on the ground. This was the second. Then came the third one who killed, turned his hand the other way. He killed the fourth and then the fifth elder, after which he turned and looked at the crown prince. He said that only he was left. The crown prince was very scared and began to talk about Yi waiting. Despite the fact that it was deep night, the moon was shining very brightly and there was just a red spot around it. It resembled the color of blood. At that moment, the sky was pierced by a bloody beam that came from somewhere in the mountains. The emperor and his daughter were in a hurry because they understood that the crown prince could do something again. The emperor's daughter saw some kind of bloody light. The emperor said that they needed to go in that direction quickly. At that moment, Mentor Ye's disciple thought that he felt a familiar aura. He realized that it was him, although this person could certainly cope with his mentor, but meeting him was very unpleasant for him. The crown prince saw his master and was delighted. He began to shout that finally the master was here. His time had come. Indeed, they could all see that the master they were all expecting had arrived, only for different reasons. It was the leader of the bloody cult of the central region, the Stone Absolute. He was the one who stood behind all these atrocities. When I saw him, I asked if he was really behind all these murders. Masterfully pulling the strings, he said that he thought that he would never come out and would remain in his hiding place in his hole. Stone Absolute replied to Ye that he was just a cultivator from the wild region. He certainly acknowledged that he had some abilities, but he was still not worthy of fighting him. He looked at the student, he said, but he has his old friend standing there, and it is he who arouses his interest. The student said that he is a bloody demon and did not expect that he is still alive. Stone Absolute. When he heard that he was called a blood demon, he said that no one had called him that since he was surrounded by the holy lands of the central region 200 years ago. The student looked at his opponent and said that those who survived the Great War would definitely not forget all of this. This was the Stone Absolute, once the most powerful of the true immortals. He strengthened his power, absorbing the roof of people, taught his dark techniques to others, spreading evil and causing untold troubles. His methods were so vile and his development so rapid that the greatest powers united to destroy him. Even he, a representative of the demonic path, was forced to participate in this war. It was clear only one thing: if this news reaches the central region, there will be a huge commotion. The crown prince turned to his master, since he was already here, that this woman wanted to kill him and he must avenge him. When he heard this request and heard that he was calling him a woman, he turned all his anger on his student because he considered him impudent. Xiao Heng turned to him and said that he really is the same disgusting bloody demon. He has no mercy even for his students. The Stone Absolute looked at him and said that the student is nobody. He can find another at any time, but if he wants him dead, he will not survive. Hasn't he yet understood how he acts? Mentor E watched everything that was happening from the sidelines. He thought that this was a plot, and a drama was unfolding before his eyes. His disciple shouted to the Stone Absolute that he saw with his own eyes how his immortal body was destroyed by 4 divine artifacts, how he was able to survive, to which the Stone Absolute replied that he had previously determined a drop of his life blood and hid it. After which he looked at the real guy in front of him and said that he was in a similar situation here. The Stone Absolute said that now he urgently needs to restore his strength, and that he is only at the initial stage of the transformation of the spirit. This is at the 5th level. He must surrender and let his blood fill his body, and then they will be together forever. Xiao Heng told him that he was just crazy. Even in the central region, he rejected him time after time, and he still did not calm down. Then the Stone Absolute asked if he really thought that a 5th level spirit transformation peak cultivator would be able to defeat him. And then he added, the more he resists, the more excited he gets for others. A battle with a difference in strength of several stages is still possible, but in his case it is just a fantasy. To which he heard laughter in response, and that how does he know without trying the divine path of the 5 absolutes? The Stone Absolute was completely confident in his superiority and could not even imagine that he could do anything to him. Therefore, in response, he used the same bloody hand. It was one of his techniques that was supposed to instantly destroy the enemy. But everything didn't turn out the way he wanted. His opponent and his technique was several times stronger. So he thought that this was simply impossible. The fire was so strong, he realized that a cultivator of the initial stage of the 5th level spirit transformation was able to destroy his bloody palm once. He didn't understand where this guy got such a technique from, but his opponent said that the show was just beginning, and he also prepared to show his new technique. It was a fire frost technique, which was several times stronger than his previous technique. His opponent, the Stone Absolute, could not accept this. He believed that he was just losing and therefore was trying to intimidate him, so he used bloody soul absorption. When these two techniques intersected, the Stone Absolute realized that his technique was much weaker. He didn't understand what kind of fire technique it was. It was so sinister that he couldn't deal with it, and it was absorbing him. Stone Absolute couldn't accept his loss, so he said that he was ready to kill his opponent, but not to deal him even more damage with all his possible fighting techniques. He told the guy that he was the one he once singled out from everyone else, and that impressed him. And then he added, did he really receive an incredible legacy during his victory in the central region, or did he become a disciple of a powerful master? The student responded, with this technique, he is already on the way to reviving his glory in the central region. Even someone like him, who has never held the entire central region in fear, now cannot deal with him, but he should not know where he got it from. Stone Absolute added, if you let it develop further, then even he won't be able to control it. At that moment, he said that he was very sorry, but that was the end of it. Now, he had to know the truth about the power of his immortal body. Immediately after these words, he used his technique in which he destroyed everything around him and began to absorb their blood in order to increase his strength. Meanwhile, in the cities of the state of Harmony, people were dying. They were screaming for help, for someone to save them. They didn't want to die. At this time, the Stone Absolute felt its superiority in this world. He laughed, realizing that this feeling was magnificent, and these people had become his food long before that. And if he wanted, he could instantly absorb them, strengthening his strength. Mentor Ye looked at his student and told him not to waste time and finish this guy as quickly as possible, to which the student said not to tell him what to do. Xiao Hong thought about how he ended up in this situation. He expected that his mentor would not be able to cope with the blood demon and would ask him for help. Then he would have intervened with honor, but the situation turned out completely differently. For some reason, he thought that it seemed that even he would not be able to get out of this fight unharmed. He was a little desperate. This is the energy of the radiance that was in his opponents. It was incredibly destructive, and his powers were becoming more and more with each passing moment. The sky above the state of Wei was fiery red. It seemed as if the entire state was covered in blood. Stone Absolute believed that he had fought with powerful cultivators and was not inferior to them in any way. Even the elders from the Holy Lands who used immortal artifacts could not completely destroy his immortal body. On this day, his immortal body is restored by 70%. When he absorbs all the living creatures of the wild region, he will reach his full strength, and then even the central city will not be able to resist him. He looked at the guy and said that he gave him a chance. If he had reached this point, it was solely his fault. He extended his hand and told him to die. The disciple thought that this bastard had reached the fusion stage. It was already the 6th level. This was a very bad thing, so he used the technique of purple flame burning the sky. The very next moment, two great techniques collided. Now it was necessary to understand which of these techniques would be stronger and who would survive. He put all his strength into it. He felt that he was becoming weaker, and he had almost no strength left to resist. He understood that fighting against a stronger opponent in such conditions meant certain death, and all that was left was to burn the Dantian and fight to the death. Gathering his last strength, he used another technique that he had mastered, this golden flame that pierced the heavens, as well as the furious flame of a dragon that was supposed to stop his opponent. The Stone Absolute said that it was all useless, and there was no point in trying to resist his attack. For his immortal body, it was nothing more than a slight itch. The Stone Absolute said that this is the end for the guy. He won't be able to hold out any longer, and he must die. The young man thought that even his strongest technique could not hurt his opponent. He did not understand what to do, and he placed a golden flame shield in front of himself. The Stone Absolute attacked him again, and despite the golden flame shield standing there, he easily destroyed it with one blow. When the fragments of this flame of the new account began to fly in different directions, the student was thrown back, and it seemed to the horse that this was already the end. At that moment, everyone heard the sound of hooves. The emperor of the Wei State was approaching this place with his retinue. He was worried only about the immortals. When his daughter saw it, she asked her father what kind of monster it was. She was very scared. Then the emperor thought that this was the source of the evil that had destroyed the Wei State. Even immortals could not cope with it. Is his country really doomed? The immortal was thrown aside, tried to rise. You could hear him coughing in pain. At that moment, he thought, Is this really the end of his path to immortality? After all, he had mastered this technique with such difficulty. He shouldn't have given up so easily. Should he really ask for help? He thought that admitting that he was worse than him was a shame for him. Besides, he was only at the peak of spirit transformation. He was at the 5th level, which was not comparable to the stage of the fusion of the 6th level. The Stone Absolute said that they are cultivators and strive for eternal life. He does not want to continue the path with him. Then he must die and become part of his body. He will carry his will to the very end of the path. After which he extended his huge hand to grab it and destroy it. At that moment, the young man understood that it was all over for him. There was just emptiness in his head. He stopped resisting. Perhaps it was just the instinct of self-preservation or an attempt to grasp at the last straw, but he shouted to his mentor to save him. Stone Absolute. When he heard the word mentor, he was very surprised and asked if he really became someone's disciple. Mentor E at this moment video about how his student finally realized who he owes his knowledge to. And at that very last moment, when he is on the edge of his life, he turned to someone but his mentor for protection. E stood in front of his student, looking straight into the eyes of the Stone Absolutely. He said that he was his mentor. Stone Absolute laughed and said that he didn't expect that he would stoop to such a level that he would become a disciple of some lowly spirit transformation stage cultivator from the wild region. It's a disgrace to the demonic path. At this moment, the guy thought, although his mentor constantly used him, but he is still his savior. But now when he came out against the Stone Absolute, he was afraid that trouble awaited them. E looked at his opponent and said, can he consider that he looks down on him and doesn't value him at all? The Stone Absolute answered him that the ant does not know how high the sky is. At another time, he could drown him with one spit. The student turned to his mentor. He asked him for forgiveness because he knew that he was no match for the bloody demon. But he still asked for help, and then he said if he could still do something, then just let them run away. His mentor E told him to run away. It is not a way out of the situation, and it is simply impossible. There was a smile on his face. After which, the mentor added that his student should watch how he would now kill this guy for his sake. The student had many questions and could not believe it. Stone Absolute, when he heard these words, just laughed. He didn't even want to believe that he could kill him. He thought that his opponent wouldn't even withstand one blow. He didn't understand what he was hoping for. So he told him that he was an ordinary ignorant and he was an upstart and he better run away as quickly as possible. Otherwise, he would just kill him. Xiao Heng shouted to his teacher not to think about him here and just ran away from this place because he thought that everything was already over. A message came that it was detected that the owner is under attack by an enemy at the initial stage of fusion. A passive effect was activated. I will recover strongly. And the level of the middle stage of fusion was obtained. I understand that at that moment he raised his level and moved to the next one. He gained power that is greater than the power of his opponent. Therefore, in response to the attack that the Stone Absolute tried to use on him, he responded by delivering a powerful blow to him. The Stone Absolute, having received such a blow in response, did not understand what was happening and how it was possible that a cultivator of the 5th level spirit transformation was able to inflict damage on him. After thinking for a while and looking at his opponent, he realized that this was not a 5th level spirit transformation cultivator. His opponent had already reached the fusion stage and was at the 6th level. His student didn't understand what was happening because just a second ago he thought that this was the end. This guy was hiding everything, pretending to be a spirit transformation cultivator. But in fact, he turned out to be a powerful master of the fusion stage. Therefore, it was not surprising that he had always provoked him like this. All this time, he relied on his strength as a 6th level fusion stage, and he thought that he had almost fallen for this bait. Xiao Heng caught himself thinking that it was very good that he had not entered into an open conflict with him then, because he did not have so much strength yet. The emperor's daughter told her father that the immortal looked so impressive, she wanted to be like him, to which the emperor replied that his opponent was a terrible monster. He was afraid that it would still be hard. At this moment, Ye only thought of one thing, that he was overwhelmed with feelings after reaching the fusion stage of the 6th level. It seemed that with one movement of the hand, one could destroy heaven and earth. His opponent said that even if they were both at the fusion stage, and they were both at the 6th level, the difference between his technique from the depths and the Stone Absolute technique was like heaven and earth. He was ready to show him. So he prepared himself to show his opponent what real strength was, and swung his sword to attack him. E at that moment was calmer than ever. He answered his opponent that most likely he himself does not know what true strength is. At this moment he struck back and attacked his opponent with another technique, the seal of the human king. It was several times superior to the opponent's technique. All he had to do was stretch his arm forward and point two of his fingers towards his opponent to stop his attack, even though the stone absolute on the other side tried to attack from both sides with its two huge fists. But each of his attacks did not achieve its goal. He could not break through the protective field and could not inflict a single blow on his opponent. So he thought, how is this possible and what is happening now? He had a complete misunderstanding. At that moment, E responded to her opponent smiling. This is what he calls a difference in fighting technique, thought that his seal of the king of people, thanks to the system, reached the stage of mastery and now it is much stronger than the first time. The stone absolute could not accept his defeat. He said that he did not see anything in it because he still could not kill him. And in a long battle, he would not defeat him. E thought that the immortal body was really impressive. Teacher Ye extended his hand forward and said what his opponent thought about it. Concentrating his power in his two index fingers, he thought that this technique had already reached the stage of perfection. And at that moment, he used the technique of the finger of the great void. One finger forged the heavens and the earth, and the second finger destroyed the mountains and rivers. The third finger destroyed all living things. The fourth finger crushed the heavens. When his opponent saw this technique, he thought that he did not understand what it was. At that moment, he started shouting that he was taking his words back and that Mentor Ye was truly worthy of fighting him. He demanded that they no longer hide anything and that they resolve everything with one blow. Therefore, the stone absolute applied its technique of blood rushing into the living source. This technique was supposed to fill his body with power so that he could strike his opponent with all his might. But this time, something went wrong for him. His opponent was much stronger. Despite the fact that it was his business and he received additional strength, he still could not resist. The only question that tormented him at that moment was who his opponent was and why he couldn't deal with him. He wondered why such monsters were found in this small, wild region. Had the talents of the outside world become so strong during the time he had been away? His student thought that the mentor was really too strong against the background of this technique. Even the 3,000 blazing flames that he possessed faded. It is not surprising that he was confident in himself before. It turns out that he simply did not consider him a worthy opponent. The young man replied to his opponent that he was Ye Junling, the head of Cloudy Dalai Peak from Zhuantianzong. At this moment, his opponent thought that it was simply impossible when he entered the wild region. He conducted an investigation. Even the head of their sect had not reached the stage of the 5th level spirit transformation. Stone Absolute said that he would remember him as Ye Junling before he was killed. At that moment, after he said he started to use the bloody path, he needed it in order to disappear. Xiao Heng. When he saw this, he shouted that he saw very bad things, as the Stone Absolute is trying to escape. If he manages to leave, the consequences will be catastrophic. To which the Stone Absolute said to E that next time he would not be so careless. At that moment, his body seemed to begin to dissolve. And the next moment, it turned into one bloody cloud that laughed loudly and tried to disappear from this place. When this cloud began to rise up and form a bloody funnel, E, hearing his words, said that next time it won't be the way he wants. After which he extended his hand forward in order to stop his opponent. He could not let him go. He pulled his opponent into a squat and said that no, it won't be the way he wants, but he wants it all to end this time. E told him that the consumption of human blood is a crime against all living things and he must disappear from the face of this earth. After which he used another technique that he had in stock in order to destroy his opponent. After just a few minutes, it was clear that this stone was absolutely finished. His disciple sat aside and thought that never before had the formidable bloody demon, who held the central region in fear, fallen so easily at the hands of his mentor. The emperor was simply delighted, and his daughter too. They shouted that it was wonderful. The demon was destroyed by the immortal, and his state was finally saved, all thanks to the immortal. E really felt on top at that moment. He understood that he was even stronger. He turned to the system without understanding where the reward was. He told the system not to make him remind him. A second later, the system congratulated him and said that he was receiving the bone of the Supreme. It was a mysterious bone with runes that gives the owner the highest innate power. It is a gift for the one who is destined to become the greatest of the greatest. E thought Supreme really is cool. A message came from the system that it begins the binding after the completion of the bone binding. The supreme power of the host will increase significantly. Immediately, the binding was completed by the system. Xiao Heng looked at his mentor and realized the energy emanating from him made him shudder. He was wondering what kind of huge legacy he had received otherwise. He thought that he needed to reconsider his true strength. He should speed up his cultivation and reach the 6th-level fusion stage as quickly as possible to be able to restrain him. The emperor and his daughter thanked the immortal for saving the people of the state. They will definitely record this day in the annals so that descendants remember the virtue of the immortal. He replied that the main thing is that he was a good emperor and took care of his people. The emperor's daughter was delighted. She asked if she could become a disciple because she also wanted to drive out demons and eliminate evil like him. The emperor answered the immortal that he remembered everything. When Yes scanned her with his eye, he saw that she had no strength, talent above water's spiritual root, and she had the status of a princess of the state. He looked at her again and thought that she really had some good potential for cultivation. So he told her in response that she has an excellent water spiritual root. She is a good candidate if she really wants it. He can agree. The emperor, when he heard this, he said that his daughter immediately thanked the immortal. The princess thanked the immortal several times, and the emperor said that they had saved the states he ruled and accepted his daughter as a student. He asked permission to arrange a feast for him and provide the two of them with quarters in the palace. Having listened to the emperor to the end, looked at his disciple. He agreed with him and told the disciple that they should go. His student still couldn't come to his senses after what happened. It was a definite blow for him. He thought that his wounds had healed and his strength level had reached the peak of the spirit transformation stage. Since he had started cultivating 3,000 blazing flames and taking elixirs, his cultivation abilities had increased greatly. He is no longer Xiao Heng's disciple, but as a cultivator and immortal, Hong Qianye thought that although his mentor had saved him, he would not easily forget the humiliation he had experienced. And when he reached the fusion stage, he would return everything to him twice as much. He thought of only one thing, so that would only wait. He had only one thought about how his mentor would be humiliated and beg for mercy, making him tremble with joy. It was at this moment, when there were only beautiful thoughts in his head, that his mentor shouted at him and ordered him to go quickly. The student was a little upset because he understood that it was starting again and his mentor would behave as before. Master Ye turned to his student and said that he could still say thank you for calling him. This novel about martial arts is quite interesting, and it seems that the locals also like it. When the young man came, he listened to all this nonsense that he was talking. I don't understand what he was saying, but he decided to ask the mentor again why he called his student. Pretended as if he hadn't seen him before. He said that his student had finally arrived. After that, he put his feet in the basin and ordered his disciple to wash his feet immediately. His student was simply furious. He was ready to pounce on him and first began to tell him something. But then he thought that even someone like the bloody demon from his hand was not the time to break off relations with him. He needed to be patient a little. He looked at his student and asked him if he was neglecting his mentor. He ordered him to go and wash his feet. His student was furious. He was shaking his fist because he couldn't contain his anger. And the teacher said, "Wouldn't the student dare to do this?" He did not accept that he was a master of the fire cult who had reached the stage of true immortality of the 9th level, and that dozens of cultivators had fallen under his hands, and now he was forced to wash the feet of a mentor from a wild region. It was unbearable. He looked at his student and said that he really had a good student, but to himself he thought, could this guy really have decided to compete with him? When his disciple knelt down to wash his feet, he was very surprised because the water that was used to wash his feet was the water of the Tai of infinite light. This water allows mortals to stay young and live for 200 years. And cultivators who drink it cleanse their bodies of all impurities and dramatically increase their strength levels. Even a bottle of this elixir in the central region is sold out instantly. Now it is unclear why he uses it to wash his feet. Now he was absolutely sure that he received a huge inheritance, otherwise he would not have been so wasteful. The disciple thought that if he drank this water, it would be a great help for his cultivation. At that moment, he lowered his head to take a sip. When he took a sip, the teacher shouted at him to stop because it was water for washing feet. After which the mentor said to his student, "What kind of expression is that? Does he really think his feet stink?" To which the young man said no. The student was simply thinking about something completely different. At that moment, thought that the system had given out too much water of infinite color, so using it to wash his feet with a massage from this student turned out to be very pleasant. He ordered his student to heat up the water for him. His student used his power to instantly heat up the water so that it simply burst into flames. Really at that moment was resting not only his body but also his soul. It seemed that he had done such a great thing, he can and has the right to rest. Suddenly, someone entered their room, and this someone was quite loud. He was calling the immortal. It was the princess of this state. She wanted to meet the immortal again, so she entered their room without knocking or invitation. That very time, when the mentor received the pleasure that his student brought him, for him, it was a higher stage of bliss. The princess who broke through into the immortal's peace was at a loss. She did not understand what was happening. She did not expect that there would be such a strange relationship between the mentor and the student. At some point, she felt very ashamed that she was able to spy on this and immediately turned around and started running away. Mentor E, seeing that the princess was running away, did not understand what had happened and why she was behaving so strangely. At that moment, his student asked him if he liked the way he washed his feet, to which the mentor replied that he really liked it, and then added that the only thing he regretted was that his student was not a girl. After all, if his student was a girl, then there would be a completely different relationship between them. Xiao Heng thought that his mentor was just a gat. When he becomes stronger, he will definitely die of fear. But he had no choice, since he was not very strong yet. He decided that he could endure it a little longer. At that moment, the hand on which the ring of their sect was worn began to vibrate. Ye told his disciple that a message had arrived from the sect leader, telling him to return urgently to discuss strategy because an ancient secret world would open up in the wild region. The disciple unexpectedly stood up and said that this place was full of resources for cultivation that could change the fate of a cultivator, raising him to a completely different level. Speaking about this, he of course understood that the news could spread everywhere and then chaos would begin, but this was also his chance. If he could obtain outstanding legacies there, then his power would increase sharply. The system notified the owner of a new quest to complete the task in the secret world of Luotian, and he should receive an incredible reward. Then the system sent him a message again, that if she said it would not be a surprise, the mentor told his student to get ready, they should visit the emperor and then return to the sect. In just a few minutes, the two without the immortals went to the emperor. They had to visit him before leaving. The daughter turned to the emperor. She said that she did not want to leave him. She thought that it would be better for her to stay. The emperor said that being accepted as a student was a great honor that many only dream of, and she should appreciate this opportunity. The emperor told the immortals that he would remember their instructions and would take care of the people and become a good emperor. He hoped that they would take care of his daughter. The mentor replied that to each his own, his daughter would not be deprived. After which the mentor turned around and told the girl to get up as they were already leaving. Princess Liner turned again and waved to her father. She said that she would visit him. Everyone else thanked the immortal. You even had two people in another part of the Heavenly Ascension sect's True Heritage Hall at the time. The man sitting on the throne said that recently there have been so many events in the wild region. They say that an ancient secret world will soon open there. And also the Wind and Thunder sect was destroyed. This was done by the head of Peak E. His interlocutor asked what level of strength this person possessed, to which he received the answer that, judging by the rumors, he was a recently ascended cultivator of the 4th level of the nascent soul stage. This guy, when he heard that he had the power of birth from the soul of the 4th level, he laughed, because killing such cultivators for him is like slaughtering chickens. The torch burned with a bright flame. All this happened in the eastern region in the Heavenly Ascension sect in the True Heritage Hall. The young man asked his teacher what he knew about his father, Elder Mu. He wanted to know who killed him. The teacher replied that it was not clear yet, but all the evidence pointed to them. The problem was that he did not understand how this insignificant sect could kill Elder Mu. Could it really be that the sect was only counting on the head of Cloudy Distance Peak? At that moment, the young man thought so the killer was someone else, because if that's the case, then this couldn't have happened in principle. But despite his doubts, the young man said that in any case, this sect must be destroyed, and this head of the peak of the Cloudy Distance who killed his father must certainly die. The teacher said that an ancient secret dimension appeared in the wild region. The sect will send elders along with him. And he also remembered that if he represents the Heavenly Ascension sect, he will have to fight with others. And then he added that his student should forget about the place that was in his soul for a while and think about it after. He hoped that the student would set priorities correctly. The young man said that he understood everything. Having listened to his teacher until the end, the student turned around and headed off to prepare for the journey. The teacher said that his disciple should continue to demonstrate his strength with the resources that they had, which they had won in the great competition. He had a chance to break through the stage of great completion and reach the stage of transition. In the heavenly world, a cultivator at the spirit transformation stage is called a divine lord. A cultivator at the stage becomes a heavenly lord. Those who have reached the stage of great completion are called supreme. Those at the stage of transition bear the title of illusory immortal. The wild region was considered the most remote and uninteresting part of the eastern region, and suddenly attracted everyone's attention because of this ancient secret world that carries the possibility of gaining immortality. From all parts they went to this place. Some believed that the wild region was the most backward place and was inhabited by barbarians. He did not understand how the opportunity to become immortal could appear. Others said that they were just lucky and the cultivators of the wild region were extremely weak. Therefore, everyone thought that they needed to hurry, because they understood that as soon as the heavenly ascension sect arrived, not even a grow of the spoils would remain. In the eastern part of the wild region outside the ancient secret world, one could see representatives of different sects coming from all sides. One of the elders said that this time the opening of the secret world had already attracted 4 of the 5 great sects. Since Ye had not appeared, they decided to think he would give up the fight. Another remarked that it was unlikely they had just absorbed the Wind and Thunder sect. At this moment, the elder of the mountain-moving sect, Xiang Feng, who was a transformation spirit, laughed and said that he had been in seclusion for a long time, but did anyone dare to overshadow his mountain-moving sect? Another elder said that he thought that even having 2 4th-level, nascent soul stage cultivators would make this sect a leader, but who would have thought that a 5th-level spirit transformation cultivator would appear in the wild region? The visiting sect representatives welcomed the elders back, to which he replied that he did not expect to emerge from seclusion and immediately find the appearance of an ancient secret world. This was a sign of fate for him. He also added that this secret world will be the first to come under control with the Ek of moving mountains. He asked the others if anyone objected. No one objected. They believed that if he had reached the stage of transformation of the spirit of the 5th level, he was now rightfully considered the strongest person in the wild region, and they obeyed the command of the divine ruler. Everyone present began to shout long life to him. Sect master, others shouted. If a 5th-level spirit transformation cultivator appeared, then no one would dare to argue with him now. But unexpectedly for everyone, they saw a ship approaching them. From this ship came cries that the temple of the battle sky was already very close, and the barbarians of the wild region should get away. On the other hand, there were also cries that the Misty Shadow sect had also arrived here. If there was anyone smart there, it would be better for them if they left themselves. Others believed that this ancient secret world belonged to the sect at the top of the new emperor. Also, here came the representative and the imp of the heavenly ruler, the ruler of the southern borders, who had a late stage of transformation of the spirit of the 5th level. He believed that he was the strongest. When he got closer and looked at everyone, he said that in the wild region, there really is a cult of the 5th level spirit transformation, to which he was told that there were already hundreds of level 5 spirit transformation cultivators here. At that moment, the elder in the mountain-moving section thought that he had broken through to the level 5 spirit transformation stage with such difficulty. So he turned to everyone and said that he was an elder of the mountain-moving sect, Ouyang Feng. He told everyone that they could just call him Miao Feng. One said that how could he not be ashamed, an old stump, he still wants to seem young. He shouted at him to get lost and keep quiet. They shouted that the barbarians of the wild region, even if they have achieved the transformation of the spirit, they still remain pathetic scum. The elder tried to address them as respected people. He wanted to tell them that perhaps the conditions in the wild region were harsh, but the inhabitants here were not inferior creatures, and why they, cultivators of the spirit transformation stage, should simply resign themselves and allow them to trample them. At that moment, he thought that he was very much looking at him with hope. If he now gets scared and just retreats, then the wild region will have no future. So he shouted that the wild region is poor, but why not fight? He suggested that whoever disagrees with him should come forward. Those gathered began to shout that he was an impudent old man. Was he really looking for death? Another shouted that they all together should kill this old dog. The southern border lord, who possessed a late stage of spirit transformation, stated that this old man was just a cultivator from the wild region, and if they attacked in a crowd, they would be laughed at later. And then he raised his hand up. He said that they should let him disgrace himself alone, but he could suppress him with one hand. After which he turned to the elder about the fact that he was an old dog, and now he had to see how weak he was compared to them. The elder in turn did not want to show that he was weaker than his opponent. He swung to start attacking and shouted that he should die. These two forces met their Dina, and the elder's power was strong enough and was able to withstand the attacker's power. The Lord of the Southern Borders was surprised. He thought that this old man was not so weak, and it seemed that he did not appreciate him at all. After the first attack, Stashina told the ruler of the Southern Borders whether this was all he was capable of and whether he wanted to try again. The ruler of the Southern Borders understood that this was also a shame for him, and he could not simply leave this situation. He decided that he needed to try to attack again, so he shouted that he was not afraid of the ungrateful old man and that he should die. After which he directed his power towards the elder. Gathering it, he wanted the elder to be killed with one blow. The elder received a very strong blow and also received very strong damage, and he began to cough up blood. But despite this, he told his opponent that he himself said that he would fight him alone, and now he was breaking his word. The elder stated that dying for honor is a worthy death, and he wants to tell them only one thing: go and speak to the cultivators of the region. You can't humiliate them. The ruler of the southern border, having listened to the elder's words to the end, said that then he would fulfill his wish, and took a step forward, closing in with his huge mace to strike. But at that moment, representatives of other sections began to arrive, and the place became very lively at that moment. Everyone else turned their attention to the new arrivals. It was the abbot of the heavenly temple of the Buddhist province, the master of the Golden Buddha. And behind him was the young master Shuotian, and the heir of the first Skova cultivator of the Ice Ocean clan. The elder looked and thought that it was just terrible pressure. These two new arrivals had reached the fusion stage, and they were at the 6th level. At that moment he thought that the wild region to which he belonged would never win, and that was very sad. And also from the Jade Gorge province, the Heavenly Ascension sect had arrived. Now all the strongest effects of the eastern region were here. The elder saw that the holy son of the Heavenly Ascension sect, Chen Xiao, had arrived. He had heard of him before. This guy had the body of an immortal and was considered invincible among his peers. Some people were indignant about Chen Xiao. Wasn't he the crown prince of the Wind and Thunder sect? He was from the wild region. In turn, the young man thought that this was a wild region. This was a place because of which he suffered continuous humiliation in the Heavenly Ascension sect. It only caused him disgust. His teacher said that the holy son of the Heavenly Ascension sect was not a figure that could be discussed by the pathetic ants of the wild region, and then declared that anyone who would blabber too much would die immediately. These words quickly spread throughout the area, and not a single one of those present wanted to discuss the light of your son's heavenly ascension. The ruler of the southern borders turned to Saint Chen. He said that he should not dirty his hands with these undestroyed cultivators, and that he should allow him to deal with them, to which he heard the answer that he should do whatever he wanted. The head of the sect watched everything that was happening and said that he thought that as soon as the secret world appeared, the son of the late Elder Mu from the Vector and Thunder sect, Chen Xiao, would appear. His assistant turned to the head of the sect, that while they were fighting for resources, they needed to leave the region and hide for a while. His sister replied that everything depended on their younger brother Yi. He was the last hope of their sect. At that moment, the head of the sect saw that someone was approaching. He told everyone to wait because it was his younger brother and he had already gone there. He didn't understand why his younger brother did this because Chen Xiao was there and being there was tantamount to suicide. When the elder saw that the young man from Xuantianzong had appeared, he even rejoiced at some point. But then he realized that this guy should not be reckless because he began to worry about him very much. When he saw that Yi was approaching and he would now be in the very center, the elder thought that it was enough. He didn't need to take another step. Yi couldn't hold back and told everyone else that these upstarts had completely gone wild without him. The region was simply doomed and everyone should stop and not move. Chen Xiao, since he considered himself the most important here, took responsibility and asked who was approaching them and for this young man to state his name. To which he heard at that moment the answer: "This is his father's killer and his name is Ye Junling." Those present began to talk among themselves. Could it really be Ye Junlin, and wasn't it the soaring sect lord? They thought that he was only at the soul birth stage. He came to this place to most likely die. When Chen Xiao heard that he was from the Xuantianzong sect and his name was Ye Junlin, he was simply furious. Ye looked at this guy and asked, what kind of unbridled rage is this? Does he really have business with him? Xiao Chen, ask Ye, is it he who killed the patriarch of the Wind and Thunder sect? To which Yi replied, is he really talking? I think he's an idiot. He remembers very well that he always said that his son had the potential for immortality. At this moment, Xiao Chen interrupted his speech and said that he was his son. Yi was a little surprised that he really was the offspring of that idiot he had just recently killed. Xiao Chen just couldn't contain his rage. He shouted, "If the guy standing in front of him is Ye Zunlin, he will definitely kill him." The Lord of the Southern Borders intervened in their conversation and asked Saint Chen to allow him to seize this madman and hand him over to him. He was shouting that some brat dared to show disrespect to a saint, and now he only has himself to blame. At that moment, they all turned their attention to the student who arrived with E. No one knew who he was yet. The Lord of the Southern Borders looked at him and asked where such a beauty came from, not realizing that by doing so he was insulting the immortal. Mentor Ye's disciple couldn't stand such insults, so he immediately reacted. He used his technique and shouted for the Lord of the Southern Border to die. He sent a fiery virtual ripple towards him. The Lord of the Southern Borders couldn't even resist. He didn't have time to react to this attack, so he took damage. And if I say it correctly, he and his entire retinue were sleeping alive at one point. They were all on fire. The elder was surprised how the spirit transformation stage cultivator did not die. It is not clear when such powerful cultivators appeared in the wild region. The elder understood that he called himself a pioneer in this wild region. The student approached his mentor, lowered his head, and turned to him. He wanted to receive praise and blessings from the mentor. Everyone thought that this lady was a disciple of the Soaring Peak Lord. Everyone did not understand how a cultivator at the spirit nascent stage could be a fifth-level disciple of the soul nascent stage. The head of the sect approached his younger brother. He asked him. He understood what he had just done. This was the Heavenly Ascension sect. He had to run away immediately, and they would detain them. He believed that as long as E was alive, the sect had a chance to be reborn. He could not die. Ye told his younger brother and the clan leader not to worry. He was fine, and they should allow the new disciple to be introduced to them. He pointed at the girl. Zhao said then that after solving the problems of the Wei kingdom, he found a promising disciple, the emperor's daughter, with the highest quality root water soul for the peak of heavenly fragrance. She is ideal. The girl said her name and said that she was greeting the mentor. Elder sister E thought that this little girl was the true embodiment of spirituality. At this moment, everyone heard that Ye should not look down on him, that he and all of his sect would pay for his father's life. He said that E would suffer for a very long time and would be very sorry for what he did to his father. To which E replied that if he wanted to compete with him, he wasn't even worthy of that. After which the mentor turned to his student and told him to go ahead and teach him humility, just as he had taught him. His student looked at him and thought that he was like a dog who had been let off the chain, but in reality he didn't feel like an ordinary cur. His disciple was already ready the next moment. He was ready to teach this guy ordinary humility despite the fact that there was a saint in front of him. Xiao Chen turned to Ye and said that he was a coward and was afraid to meet him face to face with the saint. The disciple of the mentor E answered him that in order to fight him, it is not necessary to join his mentor in this fight. Xiao Chen looked at the disciple of mentor Ye and also thought that she was a girl. He could not tear himself away from her beauty. So the next moment he said that with such power and such beauty as she possesses, why forgive in the wretched sect? She should accept their proposals, and the sect of heavenly ascension will bestow upon her the highest favor. The disciple of the mentor E did not serve until the end of all these words. He said that his proposals were not at all interesting. Xiao Chen said, "Is it really true that such a beautiful girl is not interested in such a proposal and refuses to even think about it?" To which the student said that his mentor was right and his father was an idiot, and he is a double idiot. At that moment, the saint said that it was good, and if she refused the treat, then she would immediately receive punishment. And stretching his hand forward, he was ready to use the technique and kill her. The saint jumped up and used his power and began to attack the enemy. He was completely confident that he could easily deal with him. But unexpectedly for the saint, his opponent used a meteorite flame attack that was several times greater than his strength and his technique. The meteorite flame was able to completely destroy the power and equipment that the saint attacked in a matter of seconds. The saint was amazed. He did not understand what had happened and how she could so easily destroy his technique, because he considered himself the strongest in this place. His opponent looked at him and, looking straight into his eyes, asked if this was all that an immortal and also a saint was capable of. Despite the fact that he lost this first attack, the saint told his opponent not to rejoice prematurely because this is only the beginning. After which he once again forged his opponent, and this time he decided that he had to do it for sure. Therefore, he used the sun god fist technique. Many huge fists were directed towards his opponent. The elders said that the Holy Sun was endowed with a divine gift. His technique of the highest heavenly rank, harmoniously combined with his immortal body, has the power to destroy a cultivator of the spirit transformation stage. After using this technique, his opponent responded that in this case he asked for it himself and used his abilities and his capabilities to attack him. Everyone froze in anticipation of what would happen next. No one understood how this attack could end and who would be the winner. At that moment, the saint was thinking only about the fact that he could not lose, and there was no one in this area who could defeat him, so he was completely confident in himself. After this attack, everyone thought that Mentor Ye's disciple would no longer be able to survive, and the saint would completely destroy him. But what was their surprise when Fog Russia, they saw that the disciple of the Mentor E was absolutely safe and sound, and he was in the center of the lotus flower. The first thing that came to the saint's mind was that this couldn't be. He didn't understand how his armor could survive. Out of anger, he began to shout that he did not believe this. He was born for immortality, and he was invincible among equals. So he began to attack his opponent. He thought that she was a frog in a well. The student thought that all the anger that he had accumulated because of his mentor would be brought down on him, and he would have to experience true humiliation. When the saint began to attack his opponent, he was faced with the fact that he could not inflict damage on him. He thought why all his attacks dissolve as if they were blows to cotton wool, and these attacks have no effect, since he is weaker than his opponent. Saint said that he had never seen such combat skills among the cultivators of the Heavenly Ascension sect and did not understand how the pathetic sect could raise such a disciple. The saint's mentor turned to him. He said that he should not doubt. He was the chosen genius of the sect of Heavenly Ascension, born for immortality, the saint repeated after him. At that moment, he threw out all his anger and all his strength and shouted that he was not yet defeated and called upon the solar body of the immortal to awaken within him. He felt another surge of strength and used the initial divine technique Eclipse and thought that with its help, he would be able to kill his opponent. But what was his disappointment when his opponent answered him that all this was child's play, and he was ready to show him the true meaning of words. The saint thought of only one thing, that all this time he was sure that he was invincible among equals, and he should not allow anyone to destroy him. The very next moment, the disciple of Mentor Ye, who entered into competition with the Twisted One, said that it was time to show him the difference between them. The very next moment, everything was engulfed in this flame, and it really was of 7 colors. The head of the sect was surprised by the level of power of his brother's disciple, who was in the stage of transformation of the spirit of the elders, said that this power with it he is able to destroy the Vawaga of the fusion stage. Everyone froze because everyone was interested to know who would win in the end, because the people who came together in this battle were quite strong. It was already clear. One of the observers shouted that he saw something falling, and it was a saint from the sect of Heavenly Ascension. Everyone became interested in whether he had lost this battle. And couldn't this saint defeat an ordinary disciple of Master Ye from the wild region? The student felt he had won and said he couldn't understand how ordinary caviar dared to compete with the radiance of the full moon. The sect leader told his younger brother that his disciple was too strong, and although he had defeated Chen Xiao, the Heavenly Ascension sect still had many elders, and it was better to leave quickly, to which Ye replied that they should not worry about it, and that they should not worry. Yi approached his student and praised him. He told him that he was a good boy, and that he would get an extra dinner today. His student lowered his head and thanked his mentor. Mentor Chen Xiao took his student away from the battlefield. For them it was a complete defeat, and no one could even imagine that this would happen. The saint thought only about the fact that he had lost, and he told his mentor about it. He had a complete emptiness, and he did not know what to do with it. The teacher told the holy disciple that he must pull himself together, to which his disciple replied that he had lost before he was invincible. In his kingdom, he had disgraced everyone of the Heavenly Ascension. The elder thought he was right. The mentor told the holy son not to think about unnecessary things. They had a great future ahead of them, and he was born to become immortal. He thought that they should destroy these barbarians from the wild region to restore the greatness of their sect. The elder of the Heavenly Ascension sect believed that insulting the holy son of their sect was a disgrace to them, and there should be retribution for this. He demanded that someone go and destroy these barbarians. One of the enraged and his disciples said that he was ready to go out to destroy these barbarians from the wild region sect. Those who watched said that, as expected, the Heavenly Ascension sect had deep roots, and this time they sent 9 masters at the 6th level fusion stage, all of whom considered Mentor Ye's disciple to be a girl and a nobody. In advance, everyone began to discuss that this was just a waste of talent, and they thought that it would be a great pity for her. The student looked and saw that someone was approaching him. He asked his mentor if he should accept the fight. This time Mentor Ye told his student not to worry and to leave it to him. He would be able to deal with them very quickly. When the elders saw the head of the soaring peak Ye, they were very surprised because he had already reached the fusion stage of the 6th level in the wild region. A heavenly ruler had finally appeared. This was unprecedented. The elders said that they thought the disciple Ye had already shocked them enough, but it turned out that the head of the heavenly Lord himself, the enemy who belonged to the heavenly rebirth sect, volunteered to destroy the barbarians. And when he saw his opponent, he said that he was not afraid of anything. He shouted that insulting your son's sacredness is above their dignity. They are barbarians from a wild region and must die. He believed that his opponent would not be able to resist him, but everything that happened next was quite the opposite. E extended his hand forward, applied the technique. He asked his opponent if he really thought so, and in an instant stopped his attack. For a representative from the Heavenly Ascension sect, this was quite unexpected. He couldn't believe that he had such a strong opponent. E approached his opponent very closely in order to examine him and mock him a little. At this moment, his armor was discouraged, and E decided to strike him and throw him back to the side. He asked your opponent if this is all he is capable of, and thought to himself that he did not expect at all that even though I am connected with the bone of the supreme physical force would become so terrifying now he could crush anyone. The master of the Heavenly Ascension sect could not accept a second defeat, so he shouted to all his disciples to attack together and ordered them to kill this barbarian. From all sides in the direction of E, representatives of the Heavenly Ascension sect began to move. They received an order to destroy the barbarian and had to carry it out. This time, E decided to use a technique to repel attacks from several sides, and this technique was called the Seal of the Ruler of People. He was simply unattainable. When the sect representatives tried to attack E from all sides, they would suddenly receive a counterattack and be thrown back with great force. All those who resisted and tried to attack E did not understand what kind of divine ability it was, and they thought that it was because the guy was too strong. One of them shouted that they should use artifacts to destroy him. Therefore, one of E's opponents used an attack and decided that he could damage the immortal Mech of Jade Serenity technique. All the attackers joined forces and at one moment attacked what they considered to be a barbarian from the wild region who was grieving for all of them. And it was so strong that everyone watching froze in anticipation of what would happen next and whether E would be able to withstand the attack that was coming from all sides. The observers from the Buddha sect said that it was a very cruel joint attack. Turning to their god, they asked him to make this man reach the unnameable death. Others looking at him thought that this bald hypocrite was outwardly showing mercy. The head of the sect and the elder brother E, watching everything that was happening, said that this was very bad, and his brother was in danger. His assistant said that he had already said that it was necessary to run away immediately. Now it was too late. He thought that after what he had already seen in the Wei State, he no longer had any doubt that he was definitely hiding something else, and he wanted to see what he was still hiding. E was so determined, realizing that he was being attacked with all his might from all sides, that he said that if they were behaving like this, then they should try something else. And this technique was another one of his divine abilities. He decided to use it, and it was called the Bones of the Supreme. After he used this technique, the house immediately repelled all the attacks that were applied to him and began to attack himself. The elders did not understand what else was going on and what kind of energy he possessed. What happened next surprised them even more, because he used the divine punishing radiance technique, and after this technique, none of his opponents could remain without damage. All the attackers felt how defenseless they were, and how they were being thrown back with great force. They began to shout to their elder not to fire so that he would save them. Their fire elder mentor thought that he didn't expect this guy to be so problematic. His holy son was already seriously injured if the other members of his sect also went. So he decided to intervene and attack this guy himself in order to save the people from his sect. They thought that they were finally saved. It was a 3-star spiritual artifact. The Elder of Fire approached from behind. He wanted to damage E, telling him that this is where it will all end, and he must die. At this moment, Ye turned and looked at the Elder of Fire, and to himself he thought that this was just great. He was waiting for him. The system notified that a collision was detected, the ability was activated, and the power of the full stage of the 6th level fusion was obtained. As soon as he received this notification from the system, he immediately realized that he was at a higher level than his opponent, and he could try to destroy him. That he is from the ideal, he turned around and fought back the Elders of Fire. Neither his artifact nor his power had any meaning anymore. The fire elder asked the boy if he had been hiding his power all this time, and how did he manage to do it. But he was no longer interested in talking to him because he already got what he needed to get from this fight, so he simply attacked him. The fire elder was simply crushed and destroyed. He said that this incident they admit the defeat of the Heavenly Ascension sect and voluntarily abandoned the fight for the secret world. Ye didn't agree with what he was saying, so he laughed and answered the elders of the Heavenly Ascension sect that they came when they wanted and decided to just leave. He said that they should just die. The fire elder of the Heavenly Ascension sect looked at him and said that he had gone too far, and wasn't he afraid of the wrath of his Heavenly Ascension sect? The elder on fire looked at him and said that now everything became clear to him, which means another elder from their effect from the outer courtyard, he also died from his hand. He answered him that he was saying everything correctly, and if he had already made enemies once, then why not kill a couple more of his enemies for fun? Which he did the next moment. With one blow he destroyed the elders, but the fire that tried to stop him. The observers did not understand how this was possible, and how this barbarian from the wild region destroyed the elders of the fire sect and Heavenly Ascension with one movement of his hand. Well, it was clear that the elders fell, the hearts of the ex-saint had their reputation destroyed. But everything was still completely unclear, and despite what had happened now in the eastern lands, a real performance was about to begin. The saint, watching what was happening at that moment, thought that even the elder of fire could not cope with this barbarian. He was in great pain because was his father's killer really that strong, and would he ever be able to avenge his father's death? Those who arrived from the Heavenly Ascension sect began to shout that their elder was in trouble. They should quickly take the Holy Sun and leave this place, and in order for them to leave, they should not activate the golden ship. The mentor student was simply furious. He did not understand what it meant that they had quarreled so quickly and decided to run away after all this, so he decided to attack them so that they would all die. The observers were simply shocked. First they killed the elders of the Heavenly Ascension sect. Now they are going to kill the Holy Sun too. Have they really decided to destroy everyone to the last one? Did the observers say that this mentor and his disciple are simply crazy? The representative of the Boom Dep cult tried to stop the attack of the mentoree's student and protect the very ship on which they arrived. The bald representative turned to the young lady. Until that moment he thought that the student was a woman. He asked that he wanted to know when this endless cycle together would end and why they wanted to exterminate every last one of them. The student answered him, I address him as a bald monk so that he does not think that he does not see his Buddhist tricks. And if the bald monk saves them now, then in this case he can make everyone who is Heavenly Ascension feel obligated to him. This hypocrisy is disgusting. The monk turned back to the young lady so that she would not utter false words. Her bias towards Buddhism was too great, and she was already showing signs of falling into the demonic path. He would advise her to restrain herself. To which the student replied that when he was in the central region, he despised people like this monk the most. They do everything for their own benefit, but hide behind virtue. Even if he goes to the demonic path, he will not need his instructions. The monk thought that there was an adamant woman standing in front of him, and in that case he had to set her on the right path. Mentor Ye's disciple thought that this old monk was pressing with incredible pressure. He was clearly at the peak of the 6th level fusion stage. At that moment, his mentor appeared in front of the student. He asked the monk if someone had decided to offend his student while he was busy. The monk stopped immediately. He understood that his strength might not be enough. He had already observed all this and could not harm himself. He said, addressing Mr. Ye, that he was mistaken. He wanted to instruct his student a little, to which Ye replied, does he really think that he is worthy of instructing his students? He thought that instructing a person born at the stage of a true immortal was simply not available to him, a monk. The student thanked his mentor again for his help and said that his student intended to detain their ship, but that old bald monk prevented him and they were able to escape. The monk at this point said that he simply thought that it had gone too far and decided to intervene to smooth things over, and if Mr. E thought otherwise he had nothing to say, he declined. He couldn't leave this situation like that. He followed the monk and said, does he really think he was showing off and decided to run away? He ordered him to stand. The monk stopped and looked at Mr. Ye. He was thinking that his floating temple was one of the strongest Buddhist sects in the eastern region, and he had just made enemies of the Heavenly Ascension sect. E answered him after he laughed. Does this monk really know how to cleverly build combinations? In fact, he did nothing but manage to create a huge debt of gratitude for himself and left him to deal with all the work in the future. The bald monk was offended by such words, and he turned to Mr. Ye and said that things had gone too far and he had to stop. Yi answered him that he does not understand, and that he is full, after which he attacked him with his huge fist in which his strength was concentrated, and the monk put himself the protection of a golden doll. But what was the monk's surprise when this very golden bell that was supposed to protect him did not work and was broken by Mr. E. All the other monks rushed to help their mentor, and he decided to use the technique of straightening his posture while striking his opponent. One of the monk's students told his mentor that their enemy was mocking them, and did he really think that the floating temple was a weak point? At this point, the monk said that if Mr. Ye was so persistent, they should not blame him for being cruel, and began to recite one of the most famous Buddhist mantras related to the Bodhisattva. The monk who decided to join the battle was the Golden Buddha mentor, and was at the peak of the 6th level fusion stage. He used the Dharma Buddha image technique. The observers began to say that this is a Buddhist technique of great manifestation, and he has in his hands a star spiritual artifact, the Staff of 9 Rings. Although Ye Dusty is a peak of the fusion stages of the 6th level, in front of such a master he is simply a non-entity. Some thought that Ye had gone completely crazy. So the monk turned to Mr. Ye and said that he had given him a chance, but he was too stubborn, so he should let him calm him down. The monk used the destruction technique to attack his opponent and destroy everything that was on his chest, while Mr. E said that he was very interested. Then he raised one of his hands and answered the monk that he was waiting for him to come to him as soon as possible. Because at that moment he knew that he would use the technique of the coffin of the sky burial. It was a technique much more powerful than that of his opponent. And she easily stopped the attack of the Buddhist monk, smashing his power to smithereens. When the monk saw what happened, he was simply in shock. He couldn't even imagine that something like this could happen. At that moment, E thought that it was just unexpected for him. With the increase in his level, this group evolved from a 4-digit artifact to a 6-digit one. Mentor Ye said to his opponent, "Is this his divine ability? This is all he can do, and he has nothing more to show." After which, Mr. Ye ordered them all to move inside this coffin with one movement. The monks did not understand what it was and what was happening to them. They began to shout to the mentor to save them. At that moment, he thought of only one thing, that this was cursed and that evil spirits were hiding in the Xuantianzong sect. He couldn't explain it in any other way. The monk began shouting to everyone present that this man was a heretic and that everyone should join him and destroy him. Everyone stood silently with their mouths open. It was unclear whether any of them would risk entering this battle and being destroyed. Mentor Ye's disciple watched everything that was happening and thought that he knew that his mentor was still hiding something. The monk turned to Mr. Ye and said that there was already a feud with the Heavenly Ascension sect, and did he really want to make an enemy of the strongest Buddhist order in the eastern region? To which he heard the answer that Mr. E is most irritated by hypocrites like him. He doesn't care at all who becomes his enemy. His principle is simple: destroy hypocrites. After which he told the monk to stop chatting and go to the coffin. When the last monk was already inside this coffin, the lid slammed shut very loudly. The coffin was a pool monk. After which Mr. E, holding the coffin with one hand, asked everyone around who else wanted to get inside. Everyone else who was present in this place was shocked. They stood silently and were afraid to move. He asked several times who else would dare to come forward, but he understood that they were all too afraid. The head of his sect and his older brother shouted at him that it was just great, and he did a great job, and his assistant wondered if he was sleeping and asked someone to hit him. At that moment, a blow was struck with all force on his head from the left side. This blow was given to him by his sister. He asked his sister why she hit him, and she asked him if it really hurt. Well, if it hurts, then it's not a dream. Are you an elder at this moment, watching everything that is happening? Has the wild region really won? He looked at E and thought it was just incredible that he was able to suppress them all single-handedly. After which he knelt down and shouted, "Long live the Heavenly Lord, the great Heavenly Lord." It was simply unbelievable for them. The saint, who couldn't accept his defeat, thought that this was definitely still a wild region, and they definitely weren't in the wrong place. They thought that E had only challenged fate 3 times, but how wrong they were. In fact, he not only shook the foundations of the greatest sect in the eastern region, the Heavenly Ascension sect, but also turned the priests of the Buddhist temple into dust. However, now he has made mortal enemies for himself, and the retribution will be merciless if he can further destabilize the eastern region for them. It will only be to their advantage if it continues like this. Then the Soi clan can reap huge benefits. At that moment, something happened for which all these people gathered in this one place. Raising their heads, they saw that it was simply a miracle, and the secret world was finally opened. Many saw such a majestic sight for the first time in their lives, and they could still enter. The first one who decided to go inside was E. He had to do it only to complete his task. So he thought that, finally now it was enough to just go inside to complete the task. But first he needed to deal with the remains of the hostile sect that had been sewn up. So he turned to everyone and said that everyone who belongs to the wild region has the right to enter and explore this world, and he told the rest of them to leave this place. Many of those present did not belong to this wild region and considered themselves to be of a higher class. Well, upon hearing this, they were simply furious. One of the representatives said that their SOE clan had never entered into confrontation with his sect, but despite this, their path was blocked. He was very sorry that the elders were absent. They would not have allowed such lawlessness. The young master said that it was absolutely right before crushing the enemy. Bring him to the brink of madness. Let him dirty himself. She herself will become his death. There is nothing more for them to do here. It was clear that the Soi clan would not dare to go against him. No one could accept that they had come from far away, and in the end had received nothing. Many decided that let them enjoy their triumphs for now, but they would wait and see. The mentor told his student that it was time for them to go. When they entered the secret world of Luotian, there was just a wonderful student told his mentor that he did not expect that there would be such an atmosphere. A notification came that a place for activation was found and the reward must be accepted. The system notified him that he had successfully completed the login and received the divine appearance of the Heavenly Emperor. In addition, he gains access to a unique divine ability. The representatives of the wild region were delighted with the heavenly grass. These were valuable things. They needed to look for rare herbs, but not go too far. Keep an eye on each other. E thought it was worth exploring this place a little. Some said that they would go in that direction. Some, in order not to lose, said that they would go with them. This creature resembled an ordinary stone that lay in the middle of the road. And only when you approached him very closely, and he could grab you, this creature immediately captured. So everyone was warned to be careful. The local creatures are very dangerous. After one attack from the other side, there was another attack. The mentor shouted to everyone that they were surrounded and they all needed to gather together. The head of the sect said that in this world even monsters had reached the level of the golden core. This was the third level, and no one should lose their vigilance. And if someone wanted to get some resource, they had to show their strength. No one was giving out these resources for free. After some time, in this world where at first everyone thought there was silence and a prosperous atmosphere, a noise was heard, thunder, and many birds appeared in the sky. And also the cry of the maddened monkeys was heard, which moved very quickly along the vines from one tree to another. The head of the sect shouted to everyone present to prepare for battle because a mad crowd of monkeys was approaching them. The sect leader's sister and her brother were the first to attack these monkeys and repel their attacks, stopping them. The monkeys were going crazy, and they were ready to destroy everyone who arrived in this ancient world. When one of these huge monkeys saw the girl resisting them, he grabbed her hand and the girl started screaming for help. Several of the sect members directed their attacks towards this monkey and demanded that the monkey release the girl. But this crazy animal was not going to let her go. The girl was scared and screamed for help and for this creature not to touch her. At that moment, a fire attack was launched towards the monkey, which was able to stop this creature. The monkey began to scream and growl from the pain and let go of the girl. In an instant, the monkey was roasted alive. The mentor's student approached the girl and asked if everything was okay with her. She replied that she was and thanked the Hong brothers. The head of the sect turned to Brother Hong. He said that it would be calmer with him and that he should take care of the younger disciples here, since these white mad monkeys have the power to birth a fourth-level soul, and there are too many of them and they are very agile. You need to be careful. When Mentor Ye's disciple heard these words, he thought that the sect leader was still worried about his arrival, so he had better take care of himself. As at that moment a large number of white maddened monkeys were approaching him from behind, he turned his head, extended his hand, and said that they were all doomed. The next thing he did was he launched a fire attack and those white crazy monkeys were fried and one by one they crossed the earth. Everyone else started to discuss among themselves that Big Brother Hong was simply amazing and that he had completely adopted the style of his mentor Ye. The mentor's student looked at these people and told them to shut up and thought to himself, "Where is this bastard? Why is the mentor chilling at this time?" Raising his head up, he saw a large number of birds circling above his head. E was in a completely different place from them all, he asked the system. She is sure that a special energy anomaly is located in this direction. She answered him that there is a new task in that direction, and the reward is much better than for a normal activation. When he entered the deepest part of the secret world of Luotian, he saw a huge tree. It was the tree of the Great World Tree. And the most important thing is that the fruit of the Great Tree of Peace has finally ripened, and it could be obtained. But at the same time, the secret world of the Great Lo opened up and allowed several human invaders to invade their territory. Representatives of this ancient world gathered in this place. One of the representatives of this ancient world was the head of the Stone Clan Peak of the Fusion Stage. The second was the head of the Giant Ore Peak of the Fusion Stage. He also said that he believed that dividing the fruit of the Great Tree of the World was their original task. The head of the Winged Pig Clan, the 6th level Fusion Stage, noticed that only this white bag had already managed to steal the raft and they couldn't get to it yet. Another representative of this world, the head of the Dragon Clan who had the Fusion Stage, said that it was all because the fruit ripened too suddenly and they did not have time to react. And the head of the Fish Clan added that nothing could be done when he ate the fruit of the tree. She recognized him, and it was clear to them that it seemed like they only had to wait until he digested the fruit and then grab it and use secret methods to process it and then divide it fairly. The head of the ore tree who was at the peak of the stage. They watched everything that was happening from the side when they didn't see that the light began to dim. It was clear that he had almost finished digesting this rogue. This little mouse started moving its paw. It was clear that it had really finished digesting this fruit. Opening his eyes, the little mouse thought that he had slept very sweetly and was in a great mood. Opening his eyes and raising them, he saw all the representatives who were in this ancient world. He greeted them and asked why they were looking for him. Not receiving an answer right away, he asked if they really had any business with him. He felt that something was wrong. Not waiting for an answer, he said that he would move on. And then this little mouse instantly disappeared. The representatives of the ancient world did not have time to catch it because this stinking rat became so fast, and the effect of the fruit of the Great Tree of the World is truly amazing. After which one of them said that it was enough to be surprised at what had happened. They needed to follow this mouse as quickly as possible and find him. They started running after him, shouting at him that he was a damned little animal and that he should stop. The little mouse told them that they were brothers and that they needed to discuss everything since the mouse was reasonable and ready to talk. But the little mouse understood that if they caught up with him, they would immediately destroy him. So he began to run away even faster and scream for someone to save him. This little mouse pleased with such force that before this he could not even imagine that everything was moving so quickly around him and moving. When he was able to hide from his pursuers, or he thought that he was very dizzy, the next thing he wanted to understand was where he was, who he was, and where he was. None of the ancient world's representatives could even imagine that by rolling over the fruit, he would receive the power of spatial movement. So he must resign himself and die in this place. Deadly flying wings were launched at him. The mouse ran from different sides. These deadly wings wounded her. She screamed that it hurt her a lot. At some point, she tripped and fell. The mouse began to say that she did not want to be eaten. The mouse wanted to survive. But despite all her words, they explained to her that she would die anyway, after which the mouse raised its head and looked back. She saw a terrible picture right above her head. One of the representatives of the ancient world. He was ready to swallow her. The mouse, I don't understand where she got this strength from, pushed off and began to move forward at a very fast speed, closing her eyes. Immediately after she hit the tree, she began to fall down. The mouse was afraid to open her eyes, not understanding what would happen to her next. And the next moment she fell to the ground with all her might. For her, it was a very strong blow. When all the representatives of this ancient world approached this mouse, they did not understand how this dead mouse dared to lay claim to the fornication of the Great Tree of the World. She at least understands how valuable it is and who she imagines herself to be. The mouse turned around and tried to explain to all the representatives of the ancient world that their names were not written on this fruit. So why couldn't the mouse just eat it? And now they blame her and she is very offended? The tree of the great world supporting the secret world of Luotian grows the fruit for many epochs. Everyone who eats it gains the body of the great Luo. Everyone was waiting for this moment, and when the fruit appeared, some mouse appropriated it. So this mouse must die. The mouse thought that it meant she had done such a terrible thing and what to do now, because the mouse could really die. Now she screamed for someone to save this mouse. Well, the representatives of this ancient world were definitely ready to grab her and make her die. Unexpectedly for the representatives of the ancient world where they were, they felt a force that was unfamiliar to them. One of the ancient world representatives turned his head and asked what this aura was and who was the person who dared to stop him. E didn't even intend to answer him this question. He was only thinking about what the system told him. She took a few steps forward and asked the system if it was really saying that the energy wave was coming from this white mouse. The system answered him that yes, this mouse had just eaten the fruit of the great tree of the world and its body had already been formed, the body of the great Lo. The system launched the task of accepting a student. If you take the white mouse as a student, a reward awaits him. And at that moment he thought that the body of the great tree of the world was very interesting. The little mouse ran up to him and began to say that the hero should save the mouse because these evil people want to eat him. Ye thought that this scenario seemed familiar to him, and why every time he takes a student he saves, someone has he really turned into Tang Sang. And if his first student is so stubborn, then at least the second one will be obedient, so he will make her his student. The ancient inhabitants of the planet could not come to terms with this. They attacked Mr. E, shouting that he was an invader and he dared to ignore them. For this, he would make him pay. After which, the representative of the ancient world swung and tried to hit E with his huge spiked mace. Stopping this blow, E answered him that this mouse is now his. If they leave immediately, then he will be able to spare them. The inhabitants of the ancient world were at the stage of merging the 6th level, so they did not understand how he dared to say such a thing if they were at the same level, and they decided that together they could crush him. He was calmer than ever. He understood that even if they all started attacking him now, he would be able to deal with them with the help of his skills. After one of the ancient world's representatives tried to harm Mr. E, he received a blow in return, after which he was thrown aside. This blow was so strong that the representative of the ancient world flew back a considerable distance. The representative of the ancient world was simply furious because he did not understand how such a simple blow could have such power. On the other hand, they started attacking him by releasing many deadly feathers at him. I think that this man is looking for his death. And when he saw that they were continuing to attack him, he said that since they had decided to resist, then let them not blame him for being rude. After thinking for a while, he decided to use the Great Void Finger technique, sealing the heavens. Well, the blow was quite powerful, and now it was necessary to understand how much his opponents were going to continue attacking. Well, the representatives of the ancient world were able to hold off this attack. At that moment, one of them said that they could only win if they were all together. After which they all really connected, and the first one to receive the blow was the stone one. And when he saw all this, he thought that the stone one was exposing himself to a blow. He was interested and struck them again. At that moment, E thought that everything was going very well, and he could just check out his new bonus for entering this ancient world. He was curious about how the appearance of the heavenly emperor that he received for entering this ancient world worked. When he used the form of the heavenly emperor, it seemed to him that these representatives of the ancient world were simply in shock. They were really scared and didn't understand what it was like under this terrifying pressure from this huge illusion. It seemed to them that they were so insignificant, this was definitely something they couldn't handle. They didn't understand who he was at all. In fact, it was a divine incarnation ability, even more powerful than that of the monk from the Martial Sky Temple. When the elders saw this illusion, he wondered who had used it. Could it really have been the heavenly ruler? At this moment, Mentor Ye's disciple thought how such a powerful embodiment could exist. Even the embodiments of the strongest and central lands fade before this and can only bow in submission. And he also thought that these were his tricks again, and how much more he was hiding. He had to find out to the end everything that he had in stock. At that moment, the illusion said that the Emperor of Heaven is here, and if anyone dares to resist him, in response, he heard kill merciless. The ancient world representatives were shouting that they needed to move forward, and they needed to destroy it. First was the stone. All the others stayed behind. They were afraid for their lives and decided to see what would happen next. Each of the representatives of the ancient world had fear, and no one was going to say goodbye to their own life. Even after the attacks they carried out, nothing happened, and none of them were able to cause damage to him. The only one who tried to resist him was a stone, and he soon regretted it. E said that the stone is the strongest of all that is in this ancient world, so it will have to be destroyed first. When the stone attacked Mr. Yetuva, the answer to the application of the heaven-breaking strike, this blow was so strong that the representative who was made of stone was destroyed into small stone pieces. It seemed like he was just falling apart in front of everyone else, and every little stone on his body was just falling off him and flying in different directions. For everyone else, it was clear that this was too terrible a force, so they turned to the Lord of Heaven, the ruler, They admitted that they had behaved recklessly. They tried to negotiate with him and say that he stopped the fight because they had no need to destroy each other. Despite this, he heard that he was a damned man, and how could he be so cruel and ruthless? Their mouth would not forgive him for this. Mr. E answered them. If they could kill him, they would have done it long ago. The imperial form really took a lot of energy. 80% of his energy was spent on it. He had to be careful and not abuse it. Having destroyed them all, he thought it was time to accept a student. He turned his head. He wanted to see where his future student was. This mouse had just been in this place and looked so obedient. How did she manage to run away while he was fighting for her? The mouse ran as fast as it could, thinking that it was too scary for it, and this two-legged beast almost scared it to death. She thought that although he wanted to save her, he was even scarier than those 6 bad guys who were chasing him before. The mouse thought that it seemed that the pain from the beating had completely gone away, and his legs were carrying him faster than ever before. Was it all thanks to that mysterious fruit? It was simply incredible. At some point he stopped, because he had a feeling that he already felt that it seemed like the biped was going to catch him. E followed this mouse. He wanted to find out from the system where this mouse is. The system answered him that with a little more effort he would catch up with it. He thought that the mouse was very nimble. It was all because of that fruit of the great world tree. Without the help of the system, he would never have caught it. But once he grabbed it, he would never let go. The mouse ran and thought that it was the end for her. Why was this two-legged creature approaching so quickly, and how did he find him in such a huge forest? The mouse ran away for a few more minutes and Mr. E followed its trail. It seemed that he would have to catch up with it in just a little while. But he not only caught up with her, but also blocked her path. The mouse stopped abruptly, not understanding how he managed to do it. She only managed to forgive a few times and began to tremble with fear. She was afraid of only one thing, that this two-legged creature would also eat her. When he grabbed the mouse by the tail and started to lift it, the mouse started screaming that she didn't want to die. She thought that this was her end. He looked at the mouse and said that she promised to become his servant. He does not understand why she ran away. The mouse began to justify herself, saying that the thing is that his aura was too frightening, and the mouse could not stand it and ran away, afraid that he would also want to eat her. E answered her that he had tried beef and horse meat, but had not yet eaten mouse scum. If she behaved like that, he would definitely try it. We started talking about how her meat was sour and tasteless, and that his stomach would hurt, and at that moment she started crying bitterly. Then E replied to her that she intrigued him even more, and he wanted to try her. He held the mouse by the collar, and this little mouse had already taken its last breath. It no longer resisted, thinking that it would die right now. E looked at her and thought that this creature has the strongest immortal body, the body of the great world tree, but she gets scared so easily. She only saw how he fought and immediately ran away. The gentleman looked at the mouse for a while and said that he would probably make a pet out of it and that he was not going to eat it at all. After 2 o'clock, night fell, and the gentleman lit a fire to warm himself and to cook food because he had not eaten for a long time. The mouse lay motionless. At some point, it began to smell the smells that came from cooking. She thought it was a very pleasant smell. Then lifting her head and hand, she didn't even hope that she was still alive. When she opened her eyes and saw a very large cauldron, she began to cry because she thought that most likely she would be thrown into this cauldron and eaten. The gentleman looked at the mouse and told her to come to him immediately and just not make him catch her again. The mouse looked the other way and saw meat being roasted on a spit. She became even more scared. She didn't know what to expect next. After which the gentleman offered her a piece of meat and said that she was a coward and should not be afraid of him. When the mouse bit into the meat, she thought it was so delicious and she had never eaten anything like it before. It was just unreal. She didn't understand what kind of meat it was. She had never eaten anything like it before. Then the gentleman said that this was rabbit meat. The mouse took another bite and thought, "Bunnies are so cute, and why eat bunnies?" The gentleman looked at the mouse and said if she doesn't want to eat the bunnies, then they will eat her. To which she replied, "No, a mouse is not as tasty as a bunny. It's better to eat bunny Chekhov," and asked for another piece of meat. The gentleman answered her that he would of course give her a piece of meat, but on one condition. He would not only be her master, but also her mentor, and she agreed. The mouse did not understand what it meant to be a mentor, and how she deserved such an honor. She only wanted to know, and it would not be dangerous, to which she heard the master's answer that she talks a lot, and if she becomes his student and eats well. Then the mouse shouted yes, and she wants to become a student. The mouse loves patrons. She jumped for joy. At that moment, the gentleman stood up and said if she agreed, then she should quickly greet her mentor. He called the mouse Bai Xiaoli's student. The system congratulated for completing the task of accepting a student. His reward is a divine ability, a great technique of 5 wheels, rebirth, which destroys everything in its path and causes enormous damage. The system gives the great low of the world tree as a bonus. At that moment, the husband approached the gentleman and asked her mentor who was currently talking to the mouse. E looked at his student and said that now he would pass on one technique to her. She must definitely appreciate it and practice it diligently. At that moment, he extended his 2 fingers forward and said that the mouse should become his faithful servant. Then he corrected it and said good to the students. He wanted to try another technique of the Great Dao Lo path that he received quite recently, and for this he needed to try it on this mouse. This technique was amazing. The mouse felt like her mind was enlightened, and she thanked the teacher for the great technique. After which the gentleman turned to the mouse and told her to get up, drink another bowl of soup, and eat the meat, since the meat was already completely cooked. The mouse thanked her mentor. She drank the soup very quickly, thought that it was very tasty and her teacher was very kind to her. Being his student was real happiness. The mouse decided that she would definitely repay him for his kindness. After some time, a cracking sound could be heard in the sky. It seemed as if the sky was bursting in this ancient world. Ye raised his head and saw the sky of the secret world beginning to collapse. The system informed him that it had been discovered that the life cycle of the ancient world tree Luo was coming to an end. It could no longer support the work of the secret world. E thought that the secret world was beginning to collapse and they should leave quickly. He looked at the mouse and asked why she was crying, to which she replied that she didn't know why at all, but she was just sad. The gentleman then said that this might be due to the fact that the mouse's body is connected to the Luo tree. But at the moment, the main thing is to urgently meet with the head of the sect and leave this world. The destruction stopped more and more, and it seemed that if they waited a little longer, this whole world would simply be destroyed and they would not have time to get out of it. The head of the sect shouted that all his people should leave the secret world as quickly as possible and they should be careful and not get hurt. He did not expect that something like this would happen here. At that moment, they saw younger brother Ye, who was holding a white mouse in one hand. He said that the situation was critical and they needed to leave this secret world as soon as possible. The head of the sect and his elder brother, when he saw him, said that it was great that he came. All that was left was to find his disciple and asked who was in his hands. E replied that this was his new student. Everyone looked at him in surprise. How could this little white mouse be a student? The head of the sect thought that his previous student, although he had a difficult character, had a divine appearance, and his talent was incredible. When asked where his previous student was, E replied that no one should worry. He felt that he had already left the secret world and they would meet him outside. They had no choice but to leave this secret world at the last moment because they could have stayed there and then they would have fallen under this destruction. The head of the sect, his younger brother, sister, and another brother were the last to leave through the portal, which was destroyed immediately after they left. When they showed up, everyone was happy because E came out. Everyone thought that this secret world was full of danger, but thanks to E, they were able to get a lot of rare resources. The student approached his mentor, lowered his head, and turned to him. He wanted to clarify who was in his mentor's hands. Teacher Ye replied that this was his new student, and that from that day on they should live in peace and love, and handed him a huge white mouse. His student could not take her in his arms and did not understand what this new mockery of his mentor was. The mouse fell to the ground. When the mentor looked at his student, he immediately said that he had already understood everything, but the mouse wanted to know where she was at that moment. Looking back, the huge white mouse saw a portal that was closing inside the portal. Everything was burning. The mouse understood that this was her home. The next moment, tears started flowing from the mouse's eyes. She realized that she no longer had a home. Her home had disappeared. Well, at the last moment, a huge force burst out from this portal which swept away everything around. From that ancient secret world, all the representatives who lived in it began to emerge through this portal. One of these representatives asked if this was a world beyond the secret world and why the spiritual energy here was so weak. To which the second one replied that these bipedal creatures are the very people mentioned in ancient records. He did not understand why their cultivation was so weak. The third creature that broke out added that since they were in a new environment, they needed to learn to adapt and suggested capturing this land and redistributing the territories. The third creature, it resembled the feminine principle most of all. She said that then they should enslave them first. Everyone stood watching what was happening and understood that things were bad. These creatures from the depths of the secret world were ancient relics, and their powers were incomparable to those they had met before. The sect leader said that everyone should just take a look because there were hundreds of cultivators at the level of the 5th level spirit transformation stage, and dozens had already reached the 6th level stage. They were simply in trouble. In fact, they came to this place from different parts of all worlds. They survived for countless years, and if these folk creatures unite, they will not be able to compete with the 5 strongest sects of the eastern region. One of the brothers of this effect thought how they could endure all this, maybe try to negotiate with them, to which the head of the sect replied that he was afraid it was impossible and not barbarians, and they had just destroyed their house. Now they would undoubtedly come to take revenge. Everyone just thought that they were really doomed. I don't understand what to do. They wanted to understand what would happen next. At that moment, the elder extended his hand up and told everyone not to panic and to calm down. He said that they didn't even think about being afraid because they had Ye Junling, and as long as he was with them, they would definitely cope. Everyone immediately started saying that they really do have Ye Junling, all these creatures that came out of the ancient world. They are no match for him. The student thought that judging by how confident his mentor was, he would be able to withstand even the onslaught of such a massive opponent. The system gave him a notification that a new quest had been activated. He would gain the trust of 10,000 natives of the secret world and join them to the sect. The reward would be his. He thought that the system was mocking him. He didn't have enough time to fight this crowd. The system told him that he should act as he thought necessary, and the next moment, he heard one of those who came addressing him. He wanted to know if E was really the best fighter in this place. E answered this guy that it was him for what he thought that a lot of creatures were heading towards him, and it was unclear whether his sect would be able to shelter everyone. He looked at them and thought that they were somehow strange in appearance. The aliens from the ancient world, when they saw him, said that they had nothing to fear because he was only one, even if he was at the piggy stage of the 6th level of fusion. Could he stand against them all? So they decided to attack together. At that moment, E thought of only one thing, that he could fight very well, but he couldn't convince anyone at all, and it seemed to him that it wouldn't be easy at all. The mouse looked at her teacher and thought that he looked a little worried. He was so kind to her, taught her techniques, fed her meat. She decided that she could not let him be alone. The first student of the teacher looked at the mouse and asked her what she was going to do. Seeing that she was running, the mouse replied that the teacher was at a loss and the mouse would come to his aid. E still didn't understand what would happen next and how he should act, so he was silent for a while. I don't understand how to act next. But the very next moment, right in front of him, was the very same mouse that he took as his student mister. E asked the mouse what it is doing, but the mouse no longer heard anything at all. Her eyes were already burning with a bright light and her gaze was endowed with a certain power. And the strength of this mouse was quite great because it was increased by the fact that it ate the grain of the tree. One little white mouse is not enough to hold back the crowd that broke through from the ancient secret world. At this moment, the head of the sect said that his younger brother's disciple Ye is not as simple as he seems at first glance. His aura inspires involuntary respect. The creatures that broke out, they stopped at some point because they realized that in front of them was the aura of the ancient tree. Lo, they began to talk about how the tree Lo did not abandon them, after which many of them knelt before this little mouse. They wanted to know only one thing. They asked the Lo tree to guide its people. They wanted to know how to move forward and what to do next since they didn't have their world. The first disciple of the mentor, Ye, thought, as he had assumed, every step of his was an hour of carefully thought-out plan, and his true essence is much deeper than it seems. At this moment, Ye thought that the Luo tree gave birth to a fruit that became the way of his rebirth, when Xiaoxi, the white mouse, aided inside her. The body of the ancient Luo was born, awakens, and tries to take over Xiaoxi's body. The teacher asked his student, the white mouse, if she is okay, then she should answer him.